Chapter 114. He-Yan's nap was indeed longer than usual. She even had a dream. In the dream, she was fighting with Raidamuji. That commander was brutal and cruel. She pointed a sword at his head, and he suddenly raised his head. It was actually Hirufei's face. The sword in He-Yan's hand fell to the ground with a clang. She opened her eyes. Her gaze landed on the soft bed curtains. The mattress beneath her was warm. She lowered her head to look. She was lying on the bed, perfectly fine. He-Yan still remembered that before she fainted, she was in the martial arts arena. Xiaoju and Raidamuji were fighting. In the distance, the reinforcements from the southern prefecture had already arrived. What was the current situation? Was it already over? She propped herself up and slowly sat up. As soon as she moved, she pulled at the wound on her waist. It hurt so much that she couldn't help but furrow her brows. After pausing for a while, she supported herself on the bed and sat up. The wound on her body had already been bandaged. She had returned to her room, the room next to Xiaoju. There wasn't a single person in the room. She wanted to call someone to ask about the current situation, but she couldn't. Just as she was thinking, the door was pushed open. A young man walked in with medicine. He closed the door and carried the medicine to He-Yan's bed. Seeing that He-Yan had already sat up, he smiled. "You're awake? Looks like you've recovered well." This was an unfamiliar face. He-Yan had seen this person for the first time in the Liang Province Guards. However, looking at his clothes, he definitely wasn't a new soldier. He-Yan stared at his face. Her mind went blank for a moment. Suddenly, she came back to her senses and almost blurted out the other party's name. Fortunately, she reacted in time. The words were at the tip of her tongue, but she forcefully swallowed them back down. That person looked at her with a smile and said, "My name is Lin Shuanghe. I'm a doctor and also Xiao Huijin's friend. I was the one who treated your wound." Seeing that He-Yan only stared at him without saying anything, Lin Shuanghe thought for a moment and said, "Don't misunderstand. I didn't take off your clothes. It was Xiao Huijin who did it. I was only responsible for treating your wound. Cough. I also know your true identity." He lowered his voice and leaned closer to He-Yan. "Little sister, I really admire you." "He-Yan." She nodded at Lin Shuanghe with difficulty. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Lin Shuanghe smiled and handed the medicine to her. "Drink it. It's almost cold." He-Yan took the bowl and drank the medicine slowly. He could not hide the shock in his heart. Lin Shuanghe actually came to the Liang Province Guard. He-Yan was no stranger to Lin Shuanghe. In fact, he was also He-Yan's classmate. He-Yan felt that she was actually more familiar with Lin Shuanghe than with Xiaoju among the youths who went to school together in the Xianchang school. There was no other reason. In fact, it was because he was the one who fought with He-Yan for the last place in the academy examinations. 8 out of 10 times, it was him. Yes, Lin Shuanghe looked like he had an intelligent face. In fact, he was terrible at the civil and military examinations. He was different from He-Yan. He-Yan worked hard but was still the last place. Lin Shuanghe did not work hard at all. He had a good relationship with Xiaoju. They were inseparable every day. His homework was copied from his good friend. When the teacher asked him to copy the copybook, he paid someone to help him copy it. The youngsters of the virtuous prosperity mansion were either from wealthy or respectable families. None of them lacked those few coins. However, every time this Lin Shuanghe took out a rare treasure, there would always be people who coveted it. He-Yan could not resist the temptation and helped Lin Shuanghe copy books for an entire night and received a jade grasshopper. Lin Shuanghe was extremely rich. The Lin family had been practicing medicine for generations. Their ancestors worked in the Imperial Institute of Medicine in the palace. Now Lin Shuanghe's grandfather, Lin Qingtan, was the head of the Imperial Institute of Medicine. Lin Qingtan's youngest son, Lin Mu, was an imperial physician. He was very outstanding in women's medicine and was deeply loved by the imperial concubines in the palace. Lin Mu also liked to develop secret beauty recipes. He had won the favor of the Empress Dowager, Empress, and imperial concubines, and was rewarded from time to time. These rewards were given to Lin Shuanghe. Lin Mu only had Lin Shuanghe as a son and doted on him very much. Lin Shuanghe relied on his family's wealth to spend his days in the Xianchang school. The Lin family did not have high expectations for Lin Shuanghe. They had never thought of asking Lin Shuanghe to be outstanding in civil and military matters. They also did not care about his homework as long as he did not throw his face in front of the Lin family. There was no pressure in the Lin family, and the only people they had to deal with were the teachers in the Xianchang school. Thus, Lin Shuanghe's school life was filled with relaxation and contentment from playing with cats and dogs. The debauchee, Lin Shuanghe, had fallen. Seeing He Yin working so hard, he did not understand. Once when He Yin was busy reciting books, He Yin came over and asked, "Brother He, you are working so hard every day, but you are always in the last place. What is the meaning of this?" He Yin ignored him and continued reciting books. Lin Shuanghe was bored and left by himself. After a few days, He Yin went from the last place to the second last place in the academy examinations. He came to find He Yin again and asked, "Brother He, let's make a deal. This time's academy examinations, can you still be in the last place and allow me to be in the second last place?" He Yin, "Why?" "Teacher complained in front of my grandfather, and my grandfather scolded my father. My father ordered that I must improve in the next academy examinations, otherwise he will cut off my source of income. Now I'm in the last place. As long as you are in the last place, won't I improve?" He Yin, "Brother He, I beg you." This youth pleaded, "If you help me this time, I will give you the phoenix hairpin bestowed by Imperial Concubine Shu." "I don't want." He Yin rejected. "I am not a girl. What do I need the hairpin for? You can give it to your mother." Lin Shuanghe waved his fan and continued to negotiate with him. "Or you can tell me what you like, and I will give it to you as long as you help me this time." "I'm sorry." He Yin shook his head. "I really want to help, but I am unable to." "Brother Lin, why don't you find Brother Huaijin, to help you revise your homework? His homework is so good, and as long as he gives you a few pointers, you will definitely improve." Lin Shuanghe heard this and rolled his eyes. "Spare me, please. Who wants his pointers? He only cares about sleeping all day and has no patience. If I want his pointers, I would rather study it myself." Saying that, he sighed. How can there be a person in this world who sleeps all day and is still in the first place? He must be a monster. He Yin looked at Xiao Ju, who was sleeping on the desk, and deeply agreed with Lin Shuanghe's words. The heavens must be Xiao Ju's biological father. That's why he was so fond of him. Lin Shuanghe hung his head dejectedly and looked very pitiful. He Yin looked at him and felt some compassion in his heart. She said to him, "Actually, you don't have to be discouraged. I have to revise my homework every day. If you don't mind, you can come with me. You can take the homework that I've organized and look at it. It's okay." Saying that, she felt a bit uneasy. "However, I'm not very good at organizing it." Lin Shuanghe looked at her. He Yin felt his hair stand on end. The youth closed his fan. "Okay. What? If I'm going to revise with you, then so be it. I also want to try what it feels like to have a beam hanging over my head." In fact, Lin Shuanghe's popularity in the Xianchang dojo was much better than He Yan's. He didn't wear a mask and didn't act alone. He was elegant and generous with his money. He didn't put on airs and handled things smoothly. He would often treat everyone to delicious food. Moreover, which youth didn't have a mother or sister? If they had a headache or fever, they would have to beg Imperial Physician Lin to treat them. In addition, his grandfather had a good relationship with the nobles in the palace, so no one dared to offend him. Therefore, Lin Shuanghe was liked by all the youths. However, liking him was one matter, and revising his homework was another matter. Logically speaking, if Lin Shuanghe wanted to ask for help, there would be many people who were willing to help. But his foundation was too bad. The youths in the Xianchang dojo were all gifted and didn't have the patience and time to accompany him to revise from the beginning. After a while, no one was willing to take up this tough task. But He Yin wasn't the same. They were about the same. No one was better than the other. Therefore, before the next academy examinations, He Yin and Lin Shuanghe spent the entire day revising their homework. Lin Shuanghe's martial sciences were not good, so he directly gave up. While he was revising with He Yin, he was also revising on the literary subjects. No matter what other people said, they were still decent. In the evening, after school, everyone went to eat. The two of them sat in the classroom, reciting to each other. But this kind of recitation was usually done by Lin Shuanghe, who was sitting with a book in his hand while He Yin recited in a cadence. She said, "The way of the university is to be virtuous, to be close to the people, to stop at being virtuous, to know when to stop, then to settle, then to be calm, then to be at peace. The ancient desire to be virtuous first." Reciting to this point, she forgot what she was going to say. Yin looked at Lin Shuanghe. Lin Shuanghe didn't give her a reminder as he ate the dried fruit while deliberately teasing her. First what? Yan's cheeks turned red as she couldn't remember what she was going to say next. But Lin Shuanghe still urged her. First what? Quickly say it. First down, then up. Yan randomly made up a story. Cough, cough, cough. Someone behind them choked on his tea. The two of them turned around and saw Xiao Ju lazily propping himself up in front of the table in the dark. "Why, Jean? You haven't left yet?" Lin Shuanghe was surprised. "I thought you left a long time ago." The young man stood up from the table. He probably just woke up and was still a little drowsy. He walked in front of He Yin and Lin Shuanghe and casually asked Lin Shuanghe, "What are you doing?" "I'm revising my homework." Lin Shuanghe put his arm around He Yan's shoulder and said, as if they were very familiar with each other, "I've decided to improve together with Brother He." "Revising your homework?" He Yan asked. "Yes, Brother He also gave me the notes that he sorted out." "Brother He is really generous," Lin Shuanghe said. Xiao Ju glanced at He Yin and reached out to pick up the notes on the table. Before He Yin could stop him, he had already flipped through the notes. It was filled with He Yan's private summary of what the teacher had said in class on a daily basis. The one that Xiao Ju was holding was probably computational classics. He Yan was very tall, so he could only look up at him. The young man casually flipped to a page. His gaze paused, and the corners of his mouth twitched. He Yan was a little nervous. After a while, Xiao Ju put the notes back on the table and said expressionlessly, "There are 5 questions on one page. You got 3 questions wrong." He Yan, Lin Shuanghe was also at a loss. Xiao Ju glanced at the two of them and curled his lips. His tone was not without sarcasm. "You want to improve together?" Lin Shuanghe. He turned and left. Under the mask, He Yan's face and ears were red. He Yan still clearly remembered the results of the academy examinations. She and Lin Shuanghe were tied at the bottom. She did not know how Lin Shuanghe went back to report. Whether it was considered improvement or not, no one knew. Now that many years had passed, she did not expect to meet Lin Shuanghe again. It was such a scene. Thousands of miles away from the capital, the Liang State Guards was not a classroom filled with the sound of books. It was a battlefield that had just experienced a massacre. They were no longer unlucky classmates revising their homework together. One was a recruit, and the other was a doctor. How mysterious was fate! He Yan drank all the medicine in the bowl and put it aside. He looked at the person in front of him. Compared to many years ago, Lin Shuanghe's eyebrows had matured a lot. He had lost some of his youthful immaturity and looked more mature. When he didn't speak, he was an elegant young master. However, as soon as he opened his mouth, his bearing completely collapsed. He moved closer to He Yin and said with a smile, "Little sister, tell me honestly, did you come to the Liang State Guard for Xiao Huijin?" He Yin, "What? You like him? So you chased after him to the Liang State Guards?" He said in admiration, "Your courage is commendable." He Yin was silent for a moment and explained, "It's not like that. I met with some things in the capital and could not stay there. I had no other choice, so I joined the army." Xiao Ju and Lin Shuanghe had always had a good relationship. Since Lin Shuanghe knew that she was a woman, Xiao Ju must have mentioned these things to Lin Shuanghe. "Then how did he find out that you were a woman?" Lin Shuanghe did not believe her. "I think the relationship between you two is not ordinary. He discovered my identity because military Governor Xiao is resourceful and suspicious of me. He sent people to the capital to investigate my identity." "Dr. Lin," He Yin said patiently, "can I ask you for a favor?" Lin Shuanghe said seriously, "Please speak. Can you not call me little sister in the Liang State Guards? There are too many people here. If my identity is exposed, it will bring trouble to the governor. Normally, you can just call me Brother He." "Little Brother He, this is a small matter. Of course I can." Lin Shuanghe looked at her and shook his head with a sigh. "You are a delicate and pretty woman. Why did you come here to suffer instead of staying at home? It makes one's heart ache. Ian, here it comes again. Speaking of which, Lin Shuanghe really hadn't changed in the slightest when it came to this matter. He was different from Xiao Ju. When Xiao Ju was young, the number of girls who adored him could line up from the east to the west of the city. However, he didn't give any of them a second glance. Lin Shuanghe was the other extreme. As long as it was a girl, no. As long as it was a female, no matter if it was a human or an animal, he would return the favor with 120% patience and tenderness. When he called them girls, he didn't call them little sister. It was intimate and tactful, as if he really had so many brothers and sisters in his family. When he was young, there were many girls who tried to get close to Lin Shuanghe using Xiao Ju. Lin Shuanghe was not as unreasonable as Xiao Ju. He was friendly and amiable, and he didn't get angry over these things. Instead, he was happy to run errands for them. Today, he would help this little sister deliver a flower letter. Tomorrow, he would help this little sister bring a plate of desserts. He was born with good looks. As time went by, some of the girls who originally wanted to get close to Xiao Ju had their hearts set on Lin Shuanghe. Of course, Lin Shuanghe was also very principled. No matter if they liked him or not, they were all little sisters. When he was young, he called Yin brother he in a righteous and awe-inspiring manner. Now that he had changed to a gentle tone and affectionately called him little sister, Yin really couldn't stand it. He immediately had goosebumps all over his body. You haven't recovered from your old injuries, and now you have new ones. Especially that blade, it's very deep. I've treated it for you, but it won't heal in a day or two. For the next few days, you need to stay in bed and recuperate. You don't have to do anything like daily training. Lin Shuanghe looked at her. As for the scars, you don't have to worry too much. Our Lin family has a good way to remove scars and regenerate skin. Although it won't be able to recover to its original appearance, it can still heal 70 to 80%. It won't be too glaring. Ian nodded. Thank you, Dr. Lin. You don't have to thank me. Among all the girls I've treated, you're the one with the most serious injuries and the one with the best pain tolerance. You've really opened my eyes. Also, you're Huaijian's friend, so you can treat me as a friend in the future. If you have any difficulties, just let me know. At this point, Ian thought of something and asked, Dr. Lin, is the commander-in-chief here? I have something important to tell him. He's outside. Wait a moment. Lin Shuanghe stood up and opened the door. He said to the people in the courtyard, Xiao Huaijin, Ian is looking for you. Xiao Ju was talking to Shinhan. When she heard this, she nodded, indicating that she understood. After a while, Shinhan left and walked over. Lin Shuanghe was waiting for him at the door. When he came in, he was about to follow him in. Xiao Ju stopped and looked at him. Lin Shuanghe was confused. What do you want? Wait outside. Why? Lin Shuanghe asked. Is there something that I can't hear? Xiao Ju glanced at him and said calmly, It's a military secret. Then, she closed the door in Lin Shuanghe's face. All right, if Lin Shuanghe was here, there were indeed some things that were inconvenient for him to know. Even though they were schoolmates, the current situation in the Liang province guard had made even her frightened. Xiao Ju walked over. Ian looked up at him. They hadn't seen each other for half a month, but it felt like a long time had passed. He was still as cold and lazy as ever, as if there hadn't been a battle not long ago. His clothes were still as clean as autumn water. Ian was startled. When he came back to his senses, he said, Commander-in-Chief, Lei Ho is in the dungeon. I know. He sat down on a chair in front of the bed and looked at Ian. He said carelessly, I've already sent someone to guard him. Ian sighed in relief. Since he had sent someone to guard him, he wasn't afraid that Lei Ho would kill himself midway. Xiao Ju should know this better than him. In reality, ever since he had fought with Lei Ho during the battle for the flag, Yin had vaguely sensed that something was wrong. However, that feeling was very faint, and she couldn't figure it out until she was locked up in the dungeon. Yin was certain that there was a spy in the Jiangzhou guards who was cooperating with Hu Yuanzhong. After combing through the people he knew, his suspicions once again returned to Lei Ho. Lei Ho was a bit strange. During the battle for the flag, she had fought with Lei Ho. At that time, Lei Ho had used a sword. Yin remembered very clearly that Lei Ho used his left hand when he used a sword. This wasn't a big deal. Perhaps he was left-handed and was used to using his left hand. However, later on, when Lei Ho entered the Vanguard Battalion, Hien had also gone to watch the Vanguard Battalion train. At that time, Lei Ho had used a spear with his right hand. If he was left-handed, there was no need for him to deliberately use his right hand, unless he wanted to hide something. Hien thought about it and felt that when Lei Ho had used a sword during the battle for the flag, it had been a bit awkward. It seemed that he was more used to using a saber. Using a saber to dance with a sword wasn't that natural. That day, the masked man who had led her to the mountain was the same. Later on, when Rendezvous led his troops, Lei Ho wanted to go to the dungeon to silence him, but Hien subdued him instead. Hien also understood that if Lei Ho was related to the Chong people, then if he used a saber, it would most likely be a scimitar. Perhaps he was afraid of being discovered, so he used a sword at first. However, Hien was sensitive. Lei Ho might have felt that this was not safe, so he simply used his right hand. It would be harder to find traces. However, Hien still had some doubts. She asked, "Governor, you went to Zhangtai. Did you come back so quickly?" Even if everything went smoothly in Zhangtai, after going back and forth, he wouldn't have come back at this time. Moreover, he had brought back the Nanfu soldiers. "I didn't go to Zhangtai," Xiao Ju said. Hien looked at him. The distress signal from Zhangtai was fake. He said, "I went to Qingnan and brought some of the Nanfu soldiers over." Hien was silent. She had already thought of this when she began to suspect Hu Yuanzhou. This was probably a trap to lure Xiao Ju away. When Xiao Ju wasn't there, Rendezvous would lead the Chong people to fight the Liangzhou Guard recruits. How could the recruits who had only trained for half a year be a match for the Chong people? This battle would be difficult to win. However, Rendezvous would never have dreamed that Xiao Ju didn't go to Zhangtai at all. Hien asked, "Then did you deliberately put Lei Ho into the vanguard? You suspected him for a long time?" Xiao Ju curled her lips. Yes. Hien was inwardly shocked. In the battle for the flags, she was clearly the one who had taken all 20 flags. But Xiao Ju chose Lei Ho, who had been defeated by her, to go to the vanguard. Hien couldn't understand it no matter how hard he tried. Now, everything suddenly became clear in front of him. Xiao Ju had probably already suspected Lei Ho's identity as a traitor at that time, and deliberately made such a good show to lure the snake out of its hole. She actually didn't realize. This was a trap. Boo was much earlier than all of them. How could Rendezvous have known that from the beginning? She had already stepped into the trap and couldn't turn back. "Commander-in-Chief, you were so amazing," Hien said sincerely. Although they were both generals, Xiao Ju had some skills, and he couldn't help but admire her. Xiao Ju looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. "Not as amazing as you." "Hien me?" He crossed his arms and calmly looked at Hien. "Are you done asking? If you are, then it's my turn." These words were so strange that Hien didn't understand. He only asked, "What do you mean?" He laughed and took out something from his chest and threw it in front of Hien. Hien paused and picked it up to take a look. It was a piece of paper that had been folded in half. On it was a rough map and words. Upon closer inspection, it was the map and words of the Liangzhou Guard. That night when she was locked up in the dungeon, Song Taodao came to visit her. Hien asked her to help him with something. It was to hand this matter over to Shinhan. At that time, Hien didn't know what Shinhan would do if he saw this, but the situation was critical and he didn't have time to think about it. Hien was prepared for the worst. If she really couldn't get out, or if she couldn't stop the situation from developing, this piece of paper would be her final trump card. Now, the trump card was in Xiao Ju's hands. "Lady he tilted his head and looked at Hien with a smile that wasn't a smile. His voice was faint. "Explain?" Chapter 115. Explain? How could she explain this? At the time, the situation was critical. Hien was locked up in the dungeon. She guessed that at this time, the enemy would most likely make a move. She asked Song Taodao to find a pen and paper and wrote a letter to Shinhan. The letter had a map of the Liang province guard drawn on it. Hien had been there for half a year, so the map was drawn in detail. She guessed that the enemy would cross the Wulu River. She suggested that Shen Han send hundreds to 1,000 archers to hide in the Wulu River and head toward the Liang Province Guard Station in the depths of the forest. Once the enemy crossed the river and came to the Liang Province Guard Station, they would fall into an ambush. At the time, I was framed for murder and sent to the dungeon. He Yin thought for a moment, then explained, although the others didn't believe me. I felt that the enemy was after something big. Governor, you weren't there. If something really happened, the Liang Province Guard would be in danger. So I drew this map and asked Miss Song to give it to Xinjiao. However, at the time, I wasn't sure if Xinjiao would do as I said. I was just treating a dead horse like a living one. Although Shen Han didn't believe him, he was still cautious when it came to the Liang Province Guard. He had people hide in the depths of the forest, as He Yin said. That was why Rida Muzi's troops fell into an ambush when they came to the training field. They were already at a disadvantage by the shore, and their morale was low. Xiao Ju looked up. Why the shore? The small enemy is trapped. To catch a thief, the door must be closed. It's not that I'm afraid it'll be easy. I'm afraid it'll be easy for others to get it. He laughed. You've learned the art of war quite well. What's with the granary? Behind the Liang Province Guard Station is White Moon Mountain, next to the Wulu River. This path is the way out for you, Governor. Further ahead is the path to enter the city. I guess that the enemy was after something big, and the Liang Province Guard Station might not be enough. If we were brought into the enemy's position, the first thing we would do would be to burn the granary. Without supplies, the Liang Province Guard recruits wouldn't be able to last long. They could either be trapped here or enter the city. Once the city gates were opened and the enemy troops entered the city, Liangzhou City would fall. That's why I told Xinjiao in the letter that I ordered people to hide in the dark and guard the granary to prevent anyone from setting fire to it. In fact, Rida Muzi had indeed sent people to set the place on fire, but they were taken down by the Liangzhou recruits who were already prepared. Your guess is very accurate, Xiao Ju said slowly. She leaned forward and stared into her eyes. You've planned everything out, young lady. His eyes were deep and serene, as clear as autumn waters. Yin felt a little uncomfortable looking at them. She didn't know how to respond. Why was she able to come up with such a flawless plan? It was because she had experienced the Chong people's act of burning granaries countless times. As long as they could confirm that the other party was from the Chong, they would naturally know what they would do next. But she couldn't say that to Xiao Ju. You seem to know a lot. Did your father teach you the art of war at home? He asked with a smile. Yin knew that this person was already suspicious, so she simply made up a story. No, I didn't. I learned it all myself. Doesn't the commander-in-chief think that I'm a natural talent? He laughed coldly. Liar, you're lying again, aren't you? The commander-in-chief always suspects that I'm a liar. You should at least show evidence. Yin became a little bolder. You suspected Lei Ho, so you put Lei Ho into the Vanguard Battalion. Finally, Lei Ho gave himself away. You suspected that there was something wrong with me, so you put me by your side. I'm only separated from the commander-in-chief's room by a wall. Logically speaking, if there was something wrong with me, it would be easier for the commander-in-chief to find out. But until now, other than the fact that I'm a woman, nothing else has happened. The commander-in-chief's words are a little unreasonable. Xiao Ju was so angry that he laughed. I'm unreasonable? The commander-in-chief has kept me by your side for so long. Other than my loyalty, alertness, bravery, and wisdom, what else have you discovered? Nothing at all. Yin spread out his hands. As a general, you should be fair in your rewards and punishments. This time, I can be considered to have solved the crisis of the Liang Province Guards and made a contribution. Shouldn't the commander-in-chief reward me? Reward? He asked slowly. What kind of reward do you want? Yin sat up straighter and leaned closer to him. His eyes lit up as he stared at him. Can I go to the Nine Flags Battalion? No. Yin asked why. The Nine Flags Battalion doesn't accept liars who are full of lies, he answered indifferently. I'm not lying. Lady, he stared at her with his beautiful eyes and suddenly curved his lips. Although I don't know what you're hiding, he paused, then said, one day, your secret will be revealed. Yan's heart skipped a beat, and he forgot to answer. He stood up and walked out. He Yin hurriedly said, Then what about Hu Yuanzhong? Xiao Ju didn't stop walking. He's dead, she said, then walked out the door. He Yin was stunned. He's dead? When Xiao Ju went out, Lin Shuanghe was already gone. Only Fei Nu was standing guard outside. Xiao Ju asked, Where did Lin Shuanghe go? Dr. Lin said he was going to Lady Shun's place to help make some medicine, Fei Nu answered. The new recruits who died in the Liang Province Guards have already been settled. The new recruits who died in battle would be buried at the foot of Mount Baiyue. These young lives didn't even have time to experience a real battle before they were slaughtered under a knife in the dark. Xiao Ju pinched the space between her brows. After receiving the news from Zhangtai, he immediately set out for Zhangtai. However, halfway through his journey, he felt that something was wrong. He secretly contacted the commander of the Nine Flags Battalion and learned that Zhangtai was indeed being harassed by the Yudo. However, it wasn't as serious as the letter said. Halfway through, he turned his horse around and sent a portion of the Nan Fu soldiers stationed in Qingmen over. The other party must be coming for the Liang Province Guards, or in other words, coming for him. Right now, he had just taken over the Liang Province Guards. If something happened to the Liang Province Guards in Xiao Ju's hands, the emperor would have a valid reason to take back his military power. The ministers in the court who were dissatisfied with him could hit him when he was down. He wouldn't be able to be the commander for long. Those Western Chang people, they're not Western Chang people. Xiao Ju interrupted Fei Nu, their Yudo. Fei Nu was stunned. Other than Raida Muzi and his trusted aides who are Chang people, the others are all Yudo. Fei Nu asked, They're using someone else to kill them? They're trying to kill me. He chuckled and turned around. Tell Shinhan and all the other instructors to come to my room. He rested for a while after Xiao Ju left. Song Tao Tao, Cheng Li Su, and Shin Muxue arrived. The two children each carried a large basket of food. Because the Chang people had just come, the Liang Province Guards were on high alert and couldn't enter the city. Therefore, there wasn't any good food like the restaurants. However, there was still fish soup and steamed meat. Song Tao Tao ran to He Yan's bed and asked him, Are you feeling better? Not bad. He Yan smiled and said, Thank you for asking Shinjiao for help. The little girl showed a rare shyness. After a while, she said, It's nothing. You were in prison at the time. Also, you saved me. So we're even. When did my big brother save you? Cheng Lisu still didn't know that Song Tao Tao had been kidnapped by Sun Ling in Liang Province and asked suspiciously, This is a secret. Why should I tell you? Song Tao Tao didn't treat Cheng Lisu well. That's my big brother. Of course I have the right to know. Why should you hide it from me? Seeing that the two were about to quarrel again, Shin Muxue shook her head helplessly and said to He Yin, Little brother He, I wronged you before. She was talking about Hu Yuanzhong. It's okay. He Yin said, They even hid it from the instructors. It's normal for them to hide it from you. Also, Miss Shun was in a hurry to save him and didn't think too much. Oh right. She thought of something. I heard from Military Governor Xiao that Hu Yuanzhong is dead? Shin Muxue nodded. That Hu Yuanzhong wanted to kidnap me when Raida Muzi appeared. Later, when the commander-in-chief rushed back, the commander-in-chief's guards fought with him. This person died in the hands of the guards. If you knew he was going to die, you wouldn't have bothered to save him and waste medicinal herbs, Cheng Lisu muttered. He Yan thought that Hu Yuanzhong really liked Shin Muxue's beauty and didn't give up on his evil intentions. When the two armies were fighting, he actually wanted to take advantage of the chaos to kidnap her. His intentions were worthy of death. Little brother Shin Muxue looked at her and asked seriously, I don't understand. Why did you suspect that there was something wrong with Hu Yuanzhong at that time? And every suspicion was accurate. After all, at that time, Hu Yuanzhong was well-behaved in the Liang Province Guards. Even though Xiao Mai and the others received Yi Yan's orders to keep an eye on Hu Yuanzhong every day, they didn't see anything wrong with him. He Yan couldn't say that it was because of the rash on Hu Yuanzhong's hand. It showed that she was very familiar with the Chang people. After a moment of silence, she said, It's the paper with a love poem. Paper? Shin Muxue was stunned. The relic that Hu Yuanzhong's deceased wife left for him? That's right. He Yan said, You were all moved by his deep feelings, but such a person would never look at you with that kind of gaze. What kind of gaze? Shinmushiwa was puzzled. Hien scratched her head. It's the kind of gaze that a man has for a woman. She thought that Shinmushiwa was a girl after all. She was thin-skinned. If she said that she was drooling, it would inevitably make her feel embarrassed. It was better to say it tactfully. But this mission wasn't an ordinary girl. When she heard this, she didn't feel embarrassed. She just asked curiously, "How did you know?" "Me?" This question was a bit difficult for Hien. She said, "I've been paying attention to Miss Shun." Shinmushiwa frowned. Song Taodao saw that the situation wasn't good. She hurriedly stepped forward to block Hien's gaze from Shinmushiwa. She nonchalantly picked up the cup beside her and handed it to Hien. "Big brother, he drink some water." "Hien? Thank you." As they were talking, they heard someone's laughter outside. When they turned around, they saw that Lin Shuanghe had returned. He fanned himself in the middle of winter and walked over gracefully. He had a gentle smile on his face. "I was wondering why it was so lively. It turns out that everyone is here." "Uncle Lin," Chung Lisu shouted. Lin Shuanghe and Xiao Ju were about the same age. Chung Lisu and Lin Shuanghe were about the same age. But because she called Xiao Ju uncle, she followed suit and called Lin Shuanghe uncle. However, Lin Shuanghe probably wasn't satisfied with this form of address. His smile faltered and wasn't as smooth as before. Shinmushiwa stood up. "Young Master Lin, Miss Shin, I just came back from the medical center. A few recruits woke up and were complaining that their wounds hurt. Do you want to take a look?" Shinmushiwa was stunned. "Is that so?" Then she looked at Hien. "Little brother I'll go to the medical center to take a look. Do you feel any discomfort?" No. Before Hien could reply, Song Taodao spoke first. She looked at Shinmushiwa as if she was facing a great enemy. "If there's anything wrong, young Master Lin is here. He will treat it." "Doesn't Uncle Lin only treat women?" Chung Lisu asked curiously. "Ahem." Lin Shuanghe closed his fan. "Occasionally, I can make an exception. If that's the case, I'll leave first." Shinmushiwa bowed to everyone and turned to leave the room. Song Taodao heaved a sigh of relief. Hien, she had a headache and didn't know what to do. Lin Shuanghe was a smart person. He could tell that she was in a difficult position. He said to Song Taodao and Chung Lisu, "I'm going to take a look at your big brother's wounds. After that, he needs to rest. It's best if you two don't disturb him." "Resting again?" Chung Lisu asked. "We just met him, and it hasn't even been a cup of tea's time. I still have something to say to big brother he." "That can only be said after your big brother he recovers." Lin Shuanghe held his shoulder and pushed him towards the door. "Don't tell me you want to watch him lie in bed and never recover?" Song Taodao turned to look at Hien. Hien pretended to be powerless and held his forehead. She bit her lip and pulled Chung Lisu out. "Since that's the case, let's not disturb him. Let him rest more. We'll come again tomorrow." Chung Lisu said, "If you want to talk, just talk." "Why are you pulling me?" Song Taodao. "Do you think I want to touch you?" The two children left noisily. Lin Shuanghe closed the door. Hien sighed. Lin Shuanghe was really good. After so many years, his ability to read people's body language was still top-notch. No wonder he was so popular in the Xianchang dojo. Hien couldn't help but feel grateful to him for being able to think of what others were thinking. "Little sister, you're really amazing." Lin Shuanghe waved his fan and walked over with a smile. "You're already like this, but you can still make girls fight over you." "Amazing," Hien said weakly. "You flatter me." She wasn't an idiot. Of course, she understood Song Taotao's thoughts. However, a little girl's thoughts were ever-changing. She would probably be fine after a while. "Dr. Lin, did you come to find me for something?" "Nothing." Lin Shuanghe sighed. "There's still blood everywhere in the Liang province guards. The corpses of the Chang people are piling up. My head hurts just looking at them. Although I'm a doctor, I don't like to see blood. I'm very annoyed, so I came to your place to hide." Lin Shuanghe was also a pampered young master. He probably wasn't used to the bitter cold of the Liang province guards. She borrowed Chung Li's room. It was spacious and comfortable. Perhaps it was because she was injured, but there was a charcoal fire. It was very warm. In comparison, it was more suitable to laze around than outside. Why don't you go find Military Governor Xiao? He asked. His room is much more comfortable than mine. I want to go too. Lin Shuang shrugged. I bumped into him when I came over. He brought some people to the dungeon. Maybe something happened. I'll go find him when he comes back. The dungeon? He Yin was stunned. What? You want to go? Lei Ho was the only one in the dungeon. Xiao Ju probably went to the dungeon to interrogate Lei Ho. She had fought with Lei Ho before, so she might be able to help. He Yin said, I want to go. Can young Master Lin help? Originally, I couldn't. Lin Shuanghe waved his fan reservedly. But since it's a request from a beautiful girl, it's fine. He stood up. Let's go. I'll get you a stick to support you. At the entrance of the dungeon, Xiao Ju, Shun Han, and the others were walking in. The number of guards at the entrance had doubled. There were also people watching from inside. They were afraid that Lei Ho would commit suicide in the dungeon. The wind lifted Xiao Ju's clothes. He asked as he walked, Where's Du Mao? He's been locked up as per your orders. Shun Han wanted to say something, but hesitated. In the end, he said, but regarding Lei Ho's matter, he might not know. With me, there's no possibility. Rules are rules. The young man's expression was indifferent. If you're wrong, you have to be punished. Shun Han didn't dare to say anything. When the guards in the dungeon saw Xiao Ju, they made way for him. Xiao Ju took off his cloak and handed it to Fei Nu. Then, he looked at the people in the dungeon. When he fought with Lei Ho, he fed Lei Ho knockout pills and tied him up with Song Tao Tao's belt. As a result, when Xiao Ju's men arrived, Lei Ho had yet to wake up. But now, Lei Ho was in a much worse state than Lei Ho when he fought with the Yin. His hands and feet were all bound by wooden shackles. He couldn't move. Even his neck couldn't move. He didn't have any strength left. He couldn't bite his tongue to commit suicide. Once he lost the chance to control his own life, he was like a fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Open the door, Xiao Ju said. The guard stood up and opened the door. Even though the door was opened, Lei Ho could only move his mouth. His entire body couldn't move. He looked at the person in front of him. The young man's eyebrows and eyes were unbelievably beautiful under the light. But his gaze was as cold as ice. Don't waste your energy. Lei Ho squeezed out a smile. I won't say anything. The guard moved a chair over, and Xiao Ju sat down. He looked down at Lei Ho. His voice was calm. A few months ago, during the battle for the flag on White Moon Mountain, you lost to He Yin. But I still chose you to enter the vanguard. Do you know why? Lei Ho's smile froze. He stared at Xiao Ju in disbelief. Xiao Ju raised his eyebrows. You guessed it. You did it on purpose? Lei Ho's voice was hoarse. A recruit who didn't make a sound during the day training. But during the battle for the flag, he shocked the world. What are you, a genius? Xiao Ju mocked. Are you that kind of genius? Lei Ho was speechless. He had schemed and racked his brains to enter the Liang State Guards. He had thought of every possible way to enter step by step. He was afraid that he would be exposed. Even at this point, he still had the fearlessness to sacrifice himself. But Xiao Ju's words had destroyed his defenses. He had known from the beginning. So everything he did was like a clown. He was led by the nose, but he was still pleased with himself. So what? Lei Ho forced himself to say, since I'm going to die anyway, I might as well die with some value. Even if it adds a thorn in your heart, it's fine. When I chose you to enter the vanguard, you did something. Xiao Ju casually waved his hand. Fei Nu bent down and took out something from his bosom. He handed it to Xiao Ju. It was a fragrant sachet and a longevity lock. Xiao Ju threw the fragrant sachet in front of Lei Ho. He twirled the longevity lock around his finger and looked at Lei Ho with a smile that was not a smile. Look, do you recognize it? Lei Ho felt as if he had been struck by lightning. The embroidery on the fragrant sachet was very familiar. It was the work of his wife. Lei Ho had personally ordered a craftsman to make the longevity lock for his son to wear. Xiao Huaijin, he gritted his teeth and said, you shouldn't implicate your wife and children. Wife and children. Xiao Ju played with the longevity lock in his hand and mocked. When you came to do this, did you still remember that you had a wife and children? Lei Ho gritted his teeth and didn't speak. By doing this, you are tying the lives of your wife and children to your body. If you succeed, you will live together. If you fail, why do you think that you will be the only one who will pay the price? Xiao Huaijin, Lei Ho shouted. He wanted to struggle, but he was restrained by the wooden shackles and couldn't do anything. At this moment, his eyes were red and he shouted, "What are you trying to do?" The young governor looked at him and revealed a mocking smile. "You can tell me everything you know." "Impossible," Lei Ho said. "What a loyal dog." Xiao Ju placed the longevity lock in front of his eyes and observed it carefully. He said indifferently, "Take a guess. If you die, and your wife and children die, do you think the master you serve will avenge you?" "I was the only one who did it." Lei Ho begged desperately. "They don't know anything. Please let them go. Please let them go. It doesn't matter how you want to punish me. It doesn't matter even if you kill me. I beg you, before you came, you should have thought about the consequences." Xiao Ju said, "As a death warrior, how can you rely on luck? Or, you should have hidden them deeper." Lei Ho fell to the ground. De Wei's young killer had a heart as hard as iron. No matter how much he begged, it was impossible for him to soften his heart. He was an emotionless monster. He was cruel and merciless, like a clay sculpture. If he treated his mother and father like this, how could he be expected to have feelings? "What do you want?" he asked weakly. But he knew that he couldn't be as cruel as Xiao Ju. He couldn't ignore the lives of his wife and children. But if he told him, his master would also take revenge. This was a path of no return. If he succeeded, he would live. If he failed, he would die. At this moment, Lei Ho regretted it. "I said, tell me everything you know." Xiao Ju said slowly, "I have a lot of time. Don't worry. You can tell me everything one by one." "What if I don't tell you?" The young man stopped fiddling with the longevity lock. In the next moment, the longevity lock in his hand broke into pieces with a slight creak. He actually crushed the longevity lock with his bare hands. "You can try." His tone was calm, even gentle. He said, "I promise the next time I send you, it won't just be these two dead objects." Lei Ho closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his expression was one of misery. He looked at Xiao Ju and sneered, as expected of General Feng Yun, as expected of the Right Army's commander-in-chief. "I, Lei Ho, have experienced your temperament and methods." Tian was walking to and from the dungeon with Lin Shuanghe. When he reached the door, he heard this sentence. "No wonder Xiao Zhongwu and his wife fought for military power before the 7th day of their death. No wonder they didn't even bat an eyelid when 60,000 people were drowned in the Battle of Guo City. In terms of ruthlessness, who in De Wei can compare to Xiao Huaijin?" Chapter 116. No wonder Xiao Zhongwu and his wife fought for military power before the 7th day of their death. No wonder they didn't even bat an eyelid when 60,000 people were drowned in the Battle of Guo Valley. In terms of ruthlessness, who in De Wei can compare to Xiao Huaijin? The dungeon was silent for a moment. Shenhan wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. The young man's back was facing the prisoner, and his hands slowly clenched into fists by his side. But after a moment, they slowly relaxed. He turned around and looked at Lei Ho. He smiled indifferently and said, "It seems that you know what kind of person I am. Then you should think about it more clearly." He walked out, his voice cold. "I never give people a second chance." When he reached the door, he happened to see He Yin and Lin Shuanghe standing in the corner. He paused for a moment, then ignored them and left. No one dared to chase after him. Shenhan ordered people to lock Lei Ho back in. It was unknown whether it was the conversation with Xiao Ju that made Lei Ho despair or something else, but Lei Ho laughed bitterly. His laughter echoed in the dungeon, eerie and mournful. Fei Nu walked out. When he saw He Yin and Lin Shuanghe, he was startled and said, "Young Master Lin, why are you here?" "I wanted to say." He Yin looked inside. "I have fought with Lei Ho before. When the governor interrogates Lei Ho, I might be able to help, so I came to take a look." "No need, it's already been solved," Fei Nu replied quickly. "You can go back now." Lin Shuanghe shrugged. When he saw Xiao Ju's cloak in Fei Nu's hands, he took the initiative to take it and said, "This is Huaijin's clothes. I'll send it to him. I don't think he wants to see anyone right now." Fei Nu said, No need to trouble young Master Lin. It's no trouble at all. Lin Shuanghe said, I was just about to look for him later. Fei Nu stopped and nodded to Lin Shuanghe. Thank you, young Master Lin. Lin Shuanghe smiled and said to He Yin, let's go. The two of them walked out together. When they came out, it was already snowing lightly. Now, the snow was even heavier. He Yin was injured, so he walked very slowly. He was still wearing Chung Lisu's cloak. Although Lin Shuanghe called He Yin little sister intimately, he had a sense of propriety when it came to interacting with women. It was as if he was deliberately avoiding arousing suspicion. He didn't even lend his arm to help him up. However, the two of them were not in a hurry, so they walked very slowly. The snowflakes rustled down and hit them. He Yin thought about what Lei Ho had said in the dungeon. While he was deep in thought, Lin Shuanghe suddenly asked, have you heard of the Battle of Gua City's Long Valley? He Yin was startled, but he immediately replied, I have. The Battle of Gua City's Long Valley was the most important battle when Xiao Zhu led the Nanfu army to quell the chaos of the southern barbarians after Xiao Zhongwu's death. At that time, everyone in Dawei was waiting to see Xiao Zhu make a fool of himself. A 16-year-old boy leading so many soldiers against a foreign army that even his father couldn't defeat. No matter how they looked at it, he was bound to lose. Who would have thought that he would win the first battle? Later on, the southern barbarians were forced to retreat. Xiao Zhu only took half a year to quell the chaos of the southern barbarians. Do you know how he won the Battle of the Long Valley? Water attack. You know? He Yin didn't say anything. Instead, he poked a small hole in the snow with his bamboo stick. Then you also know that during the Battle of the Long Valley, General Feng Yun and Xiao Huaijin flooded Gua City, and 60,000 people died. Lin Shuanghe hugged Xiao Zhu's black cloak tighter. At that time, corpses were floating in the air, and the east of the city stank. Gua City was like hell on earth. It was unbearable. He smiled and asked, what do you think? Do you think he's cruel and inhumane? He Yin said calmly, war is cruel. Being kind to the enemy is being cruel to the people of your own country. Moreover, no one knows the truth before being in that position. If he wasn't cruel and inhumane, we might be the ones drowning now. Lin Shuanghe paused and turned to He Yin. Why do you think so? I just think that military Governor Xiao isn't that kind of person. Lin Shuanghe stared at He Yin as if it was the first time he had seen her. He Yin asked, is there anything wrong with what I said? After a while, he shook his head and smiled. I'm just surprised that you trusted Huaijin so much after spending less than a year with him. Why was I not as firm as you when I first heard about this? He Yin thought that it was because Lin Shuanghe had never been to a real battlefield. Only those who had seen fighting on the battlefield would know how difficult it was for a general to make a decision. Xiao Zhu was smart and calm. If he didn't have a reason to do so, he wouldn't have done so. Instead, he would have left a bad name for himself. After the Battle of the Long Valley, although Xiao Zhu defeated the southern barbarians and was respected by many young people, he was also criticized by many scholars for being heartless and killing too many people. After all, there were also southern barbarians among the people who drowned in the Battle of the Long Valley. Dr. Lin, you seem to know why he did this. He Yin asked why. I didn't know it from the start. Lin Shuanghe sighed. Tell me, what other way would he use 3,000 soldiers to fight 60,000 people other than a water attack? 3,000 soldiers? He Yin suddenly looked up. Isn't it 100,000 Southern House soldiers? 100,000? Lin Shuanghe smiled. If he had 100,000 Southern House soldiers, he wouldn't have to use this method. When Xiao Zhongwu died, Madame Xiao followed him. For a time, the Xiao mansion was filled with cries and sorrowful cries. At that time, everyone knew that Xiao Zhongwu's defeat at the Battle of the Ming River was because he was stubborn and self-opinionated. He made mistakes in his command and caused tens of thousands of Dawei soldiers to die on the battlefield. His Majesty was merciful. He remembered Xiao family's many years of contributions and did not pursue Xiao Zhongwu's fault. At the same time, he took back military power. At that time, Xiao Zhu was only 16 years old, and Xiao Jing had just turned 18. Bai Rongwei had married into the family for less than half a year before this disaster happened. For a time, Everyone was in a state of panic and did not know what to do in the future. Lin Shuanghe still remembered the first time he saw Xiao Ju after the Xiao family's disaster. The young man was used to having a cold and lazy appearance, as if nothing was on his mind. But he also taught people that there was nothing in the world that could stop him. It was just that if anyone's family suffered such a disaster, they would not be able to recover from it. Even if they were not able to recover, they would still be very different from before. But the Xiao Ju that Lin Shuanghe saw was not like that. Other than looking a little more haggard than before, he did not look dispirited or depressed. "Do you have medicine that makes people sleep for a whole day?" Xiao Ju asked. Lin Shuanghe said, "My family's medicine shop has it. If you want it, I can get it for you immediately." The Lin family's medicine shops were all over the Dawei. Just in the downtown area of Shuajing, there were a few shops. Lin Shuanghe ordered a servant to go to the nearest medicine shop and get 2 sets of medicine. He handed them to Xiao Ju and said, "Take it and you will sleep for 20 hours. He suddenly thought of something and said, "If you can't sleep at night, I can make a milder medicine for you." Perhaps Xiao Ju was unable to sleep because of the sudden disaster in his family and wanted to ask for medicine to help him sleep. Xiao Ju put the medicine back into his sleeve and waved his hand at him, saying, "Thank you." He turned and was about to leave. "Huaijin," Lin Shuanghe called out to him. Xiao Ju stopped and looked at him. "This medicine is for you, right?" The young man's eyes were exquisite and bright. He looked past him and into the distance. At the end of the distance, the lofty palace was faintly discernible. He said calmly, "I want to enter the palace." Lin Shuanghe was not stupid. He immediately understood Xiao Ju's intention. He said in horror, "You want to enter the palace without telling your brother?" "Why would I tell him?" The young man lowered his head and smiled. "It will only make him more worried." "You're crazy," Lin Shuanghe said anxiously. "Do you know that the court is in chaos because of General Xiao? No one dares to speak for General Xiao. Prime Minister Su has been accompanying His Majesty every day. Do you know why?" "I know," Xiao Ju said. "So what?" "The military power must be returned to the Xiao family. You might lose your life if you do this." Xiao Ju turned his head and stared at him. "Then I will lose my life." "You? That's right. There's something I need your help with," he said. The young man's face rarely showed such a serious expression. Lin Shuanghe's heart was filled with an ominous premonition. He pursed his lips and asked, "What is it? If I come back alive, then pretend that this never happened. If I die," he paused, "there's no need to collect my corpse. Imperial physician Lin has some influence in front of the Empress Dowager. Please help my brother. This has nothing to do with him." "What do you mean you die?" Lin Shuanghe heard his own trembling voice. "It's very simple. After tonight, if I don't die today, then he will die tomorrow." His expression was calm, as if he was talking about someone else. "But I'm not sure of the result. So," he curved his lips, "you can pray, Xiao Huaijin." The young man bowed deeply to him. When he straightened up, he only said 2 words. "Thank you." Lin Shuanghe's eyes reddened. Xiao Ju waved his hand at him. "Go back." Lin Shuanghe didn't move. He laughed and turned to leave. That was a long time ago, but Xiao Ju's back seemed to stop in front of him. On the bustling streets of the city, the young man's back was tall and straight, but he looked especially lonely. No one knew what kind of path he would take, but Lin Shuanghe was very clear about one thing. Xiao Ju wouldn't turn back. Tian's words interrupted him while he was deep in thought. Tian asked, "So later, the governor entered the palace by himself?" Lin Shuanghe came back to his senses and continued to walk forward slowly. As he walked, he said, "I didn't follow him into the palace. I heard about what happened later from my grandfather." That night it began to rain. The autumn rain was cold, as if it wanted to soak into people's hearts. In a few days, it would be the Mid-Autumn Festival. If nothing had happened to Xiao Zhongwu, the Xiao family would be busy preparing for the Mid-Autumn Festival banquet. But now, it was bleak and mourning was everywhere. The 3 people at the table were silent. No one wanted to touch the food. Bai Rongwei said warmly, "Eat a little. If you continue like this, your body won't be able to take it." It was all simple porridge and side dishes. After a moment of silence, Xiao Jing picked up the bowl. He took a sip and put it down. Huaijin, tomorrow morning, I will go to the palace with you. Xiao Ju okay? Bai Rongwei asked. Go to the palace for what? Xiao family has lost their military power. Sooner or later, they will become meat on the chopping board, at the mercy of others. Xiao Jing said, no matter what, the South Mansion soldiers must be returned to the Xiao family. Otherwise, the Xiao family didn't know how long it would last. Then, even if His Majesty returns the military power to us, what will we do in the future? Bai Rongwei said carefully, Ruby, you are the imperial physician. Even if Huaijin joined the military, he is only 16 years old. Xiao Jing's movement stopped. He had to admit that there was no one in the Xiao family. Even if Xiao Ju was talented, he was only 16 years old. He was still a child. How could he lead tens of thousands of soldiers? It would be difficult to convince the public. There are many things a 16-year-old can do. Xiao Ju carelessly picked up food. Big brother, if you are afraid of everything, you will achieve nothing. Xiao Jing sighed, forget it. Let's take one step at a time. Now, there is no other way. Will His Majesty return the military power to us? Bai Rongwei said worriedly. Now that Prime Minister Su's power is overwhelming, he will not let go of this opportunity to deal with the Xiao family. He will. The youth lazily poured tea for them. Don't be afraid. Su Jingfu is only immortal. No one spoke again. The night rain continued to fall. The servants helped Bai Rongwei and Xiao Jing back to their beds. Xiao Ju stood up, put on his outer clothes, and walked out the door. Outside, Fei Nu was waiting. The rain fell on the ground, creating puddles and ripples. The white lanterns hanging at the door were completely soaked. Xiao Ju stopped at the door. Fei Nu said, young master. He bowed his head and ordered the housekeeper, take care of them. Let's go. They disappeared into the night. The carriage drove to the palace. In the palace, the current Prime Minister Su Jingfu was playing chess with the Emperor Wen Xuan. A servant came to report, Your Majesty, the second son of General Guangwu's residence requests an audience. Emperor Wen Xuan stopped playing chess. Xiao Huaijin? What is he doing here? Probably because of his father. Su Jingfu laughed. Your Majesty, be careful. He picked up a black stone. You don't play tricks while I'm distracted. Emperor Wen Xuan laughed and scolded. Sly. Su Jingfu also laughed. Your Majesty is letting me win. The two of them continued to chat and play chess. They seemed to have forgotten about Xiao Ju. After the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, the servant came in again to remind, Your Majesty, second son Xiao is still waiting outside the palace. It's still raining outside. If it's raining, then go back. Emperor Wen Xuan was worried about the chess game in front of him. What's he waiting for? Your Majesty, please don't be angry. Su Jingfu said, second son Zhao's family has undergone a great change. He's still a child. He must be feeling wrong. Why don't you let me go out and persuade him? It's best if I can persuade him to go back. Go. Emperor Wen Xuan waved his hand impatiently. Attending court is Xiao Zhongwu's business, but he can't leave court. Xiao family, I'm tired of hearing it. Let him go back. Go quickly and come back quickly. When you come back, you still have to play this game with me. Su Jingfu stood up and bowed respectfully. Yes. When he walked out of the palace, he saw Xiao Ju kneeling at the door. Su Jingfu was over 60 years old. When he was young, he worked in the Hanlin Academy and had students all over the world. Dewey's outstanding young man was more or less related to him. Even though Xiao Ju was not his student, he had heard of Xiao Ju's outstanding performance. He had seen Xiao Ju once during the imperial hunt. He also remembered that the white-robed young man's beauty was captivating. He was like a dazzling pearl, and everyone else paled in comparison. Su Jingfu had also sighed in his heart. It would be great if such an outstanding young man was part of the Su family. Unfortunately, Xiao Zhongwu, that barbarian, took advantage of him. He stood in front of Xiao Ju and said, Second son Xiao. The young man raised his head and looked at him, Official Su. It's raining so heavily outside. Why is second son Xiao waiting outside without an umbrella? He ordered the left and right palace servants, "Come, bring second son Xiao an umbrella." The palace servants held umbrellas and stood behind Xiao Ju. Su Jingfu made a gesture to help him up, as if he was an elder concerned about the younger generation. He said, "Why are you still kneeling? Hurry and get up." Xiao Ju did not move and said, "I want to see His Majesty. His Majesty is busy right now. If second son Xiao really has something to say, you can come back tomorrow. It's already very late. His Majesty still needs to rest after finishing his work. It's not a good time to see His Majesty." The young man did not move and only repeated, "Official Su, I must see His Majesty today." Su Jingfu took 2 steps back and looked at him with his hands in his sleeves. He also had a benevolent smile on his face. "Second son Xiao, His Majesty is benevolent. Xiao family used to do meritorious deeds and favored you greatly. Now that your father failed in his duty and caused the Dawei soldiers to suffer a crushing defeat at the Battle of Mingshui, he should have pursued this matter. It was His Majesty who gave him a way out on account of their past relationship. How can you be so insatiable and not know what's good for you?" The night rain drifted in from below the umbrella and soaked the young man's clothes. His eyebrows were extremely handsome and his expression was calm. His voice was no longer lazy and dissolute as he said, "Official Su is right." Su Jingfu's smile did not change. So, Xiao Ju raised his head and looked at him. "I implore Official Su to make an exception for His Majesty." Xiao Ju wishes to see His Majesty. Second son, Xiao must be joking. "Why should I make an exception for His Majesty?" Su Jingfu asked. The young man looked at him and lowered his head slightly. "Please grant my wish, Official Su." A young man's pride was the most fragile. Sometimes his spine would bend slightly, and he would not be able to stand up again. If Xiao Zhongwu knew in the underworld and saw his second son, whom he was so proud of, kneeling in front of him and begging for his mercy, what kind of expression would he have? In an instant, Su Jingfu did not want to immediately force him into a dead end. It was much more interesting to see a proud person fall into the mortal world, be trampled into the mud, and have his pride trampled until it was worthless. He raised his head slightly and said in distress, "Second son Xiao, it's not that I don't want to help you. It's just that His Majesty is angry at the Xiao family right now. Even I can't interfere in this matter." Xiao Ju only said, "Please grant my wish, Official Su." Su Jingfu stared at him. After a while, he said, "If second son Xiao insists on seeing His Majesty, why don't you accept your punishment first? Xiao family is already guilty. If second son Xiao is willing to go all out and His Majesty sees it, the anger in His Majesty's heart may dissipate a little. This old man will also speak up for second son Xiao. Please advise me, Official Su. You're still young, and it's difficult for you to bear more punishment. Go and receive 50 paddles first." He said. These words were said very casually, as if Xiao Ju was already very lenient. The palace servant next to him lowered his head and did not speak, but he could not hide the surprise in his heart. 50 paddles, if one's body was weak, would be enough to kill. Even if it was an ordinary person, 50 paddles would take half their life. It would be difficult for them to recover without recuperating for at least a year. Xiao Ju said, "Okay." Su Jingfu smiled. Second son Xiao is indeed like his father. He turned and ordered his servants, "Take second son Xiao away to receive his paddles." In the night rain, 50 paddles fell on a person. It was not as easy as imagined, especially the palace servant who carried out the punishment. Su Jingfu had specially instructed him. The youth did not make a sound. He gritted his teeth and endured it. After 50 paddles, he wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and slowly propped himself up to stand up. When he stood up, his footsteps were a bit weak, and he almost fell. The palace servant next to him could not bear to see him like this. Back then, second son Xiao was dressed in brocade and fox fur. He was elegant and gorgeous. Who would have expected him to be in such a sorry state? No one would have expected this. Su Jingfu was not interested in watching Xiao Ju receive his paddles. He entered the hall and first went to speak with Emperor Wen Xuan. Emperor Wen Xuan said. Didn't you say you wanted to chase him away? Your Majesty. Su Jingfu shook his head. Second son Xiao insisted on seeing your Majesty. This old official could not persuade him otherwise. Young people are full of vigor. If they really want to do something, even 9 bulls cannot pull them back. Now that General Guangwu is no longer here, and his mother, this old official also feels sorry for him. Your Majesty, why don't you see him and hear what he has to say? If he doesn't speak well, ask him to leave. Next time, we won't meet again. Emperor Wen Xuan sighed. My dear official, your heart has softened. It is your Majesty's kindness. Forget it, Emperor Wen Xuan ordered the palace servant. In any case, I have watched him grow up. Ask him to come in. The outside of the hall was extremely cold, but the inside of the hall was extremely warm. There was no place to hide from the night rain. There was only the fragrance of flowers that made people dizzy. The lights were bright, and someone walked in. He knelt down in front of Emperor Wen Xuan and said, This official kowtows and salute to your Majesty. No need for formalities? Emperor Wen Xuan said casually. He raised his eyes to look at Xiao Ju. When he saw Xiao Ju, he was stunned and asked, How did you become like this? It had been raining outside. The umbrella that Su Jingfu asked the servant to hold up only lasted for less than 15 minutes. His entire body was wet, and he looked extremely miserable. Because he had just been hit 50 times, his body was extremely weak. His face was pale, and his lips were pale. It seemed like he would faint at any moment. He was completely different from before. After all, he had watched him grow up. Emperor Wen Xuan couldn't help but feel compassion for him. He was genuinely concerned. He softened his tone and said, Tell me, did someone bully you? No. Su Jingfu stood at the side and answered, Second young master, Xiao knows that the Xiao family is guilty. He took the 50 strikes to make himself feel better. He also wants your Majesty to know that the Xiao family is remorseful. Emperor Wen Xuan looked at him and sighed. 50 strikes is too much. Second young master Xiao is also grateful for your Majesty's kindness, Su Jingfu said with a smile. Why did you come to find me? Emperor Wen Xuan said, I don't want to talk about the Xiao family anymore. Xiao Ju's gaze swept across the chessboard on the table. On the chessboard, the black and white pieces intertwined. Under the warm light, it was gloomy and cold. Just like how life was strange, no one could predict what would happen in the future. But the past was the past. Since it was impossible to predict, the future could only be created. The young man prostrated himself. His voice was calm, but with an unstoppable stubbornness, he said word by word, This official begs for your Majesty's permission. I am willing to personally lead the southern army into Mingshui and fight against the southern barbarians. Chapter 117. Your Majesty, please allow me to personally lead the Nanfu army into Mingshui and fight against the southern barbarians. The light flickered, and the sound of rain hitting the ground could be heard. The young man bowed. After a while, Emperor Wen Xuan said slowly, Do you know what you were saying? The southern barbarians bullied the people of the Central Plains. Now that my father is dead, I am willing to carry on my father's legacy and enter the southern barbarians again to take back Mingshui. Emperor Wen Xuan did not speak, but Su Jingfu spoke first. He said, Second young master Xiao, although I can understand your grief and anger at the passing of General Guangwu, leading the army in a battle is not something that can be done with just a few words. Seeing that Emperor Wen Xuan did not intend to stop him from speaking, Su Jingfu continued. In the Battle of Mingshui, General Guangwu was obstinate and self-opinionated. He caused thousands of Dawei soldiers to die at Mingshui. Your Majesty is benevolent and did not pursue the matter. Now that you are here tonight, it is not to ask for forgiveness, but for military power. Xiao Ju said in a low voice, I am doing this for the people of Dawei. The people of Dawei? Su Jingfu shook his head. Second young master Xiao is only 16 years old and has never been on the battlefield before. There are many generals in Dawei that do not dare to lead the army into battle. You are just a little kid. Don't be too arrogant. Go back. Emperor Wenshuan said, "Do not mention this again." The young man paused and looked at Emperor Wenshuan. "I am willing to make a military pledge. If I am defeated, I am willing to accept any punishment." Every word was powerful and resonant. Xiao family's second young Master Zhao's eyes had always been beautiful. They were as clear as the autumn water, but they always had a hint of laziness. Now, the laziness in his eyes had disappeared. It was as if something had sunk down, and something had gradually floated up. It made people feel as if they were burning. It was hard to ignore. "A military pledge is easy," Su Jingfu said, "but second young Master Xiao, if you are defeated, it is just a life. To others, war is not a child's play." Because of General Guang Wu's defeat at Mingshui, Great Wei's vitality has been greatly damaged. Now, because of your words, you want to use the tens of thousands of Nanfu soldiers as a wager? He stroked his beard, shaking his head and sighing. Great Wei cannot afford to lose. Xiao Ju was silent for a moment. "I wouldn't dare." Su Jingfu's eyes. "Xiao Ju of the southern barbarians invaded my land, and my father died. I do not want to live. I hope your majesty allow me to lead the army, Without seeing the news of victory, this subject does not dare to speak rashly. However many soldiers your majesty is willing to give this subject will take that many. Even if I die on the battlefield, this subject will have no regrets." His attitude was stubborn, and he had the determination to stake everything on one throw. It seemed that as long as Xuandi did not agree, he would kneel here and never get up. Emperor Wenshuan rubbed his temples. "I do not want to talk about this again. Your majesty is benevolent." The young man's voice did not back down. "Your majesty." Su Jingfu spoke. "Second young Master Xiao is determined to go to the southern barbarians to fight. He has a pure heart." Emperor Wenshuan looked at him. "What? You want to speak for him?" Su Jingfu hurriedly said, "I do not dare. It is just that second young Master Xiao is so confident in himself. Maybe there will be a miracle. It's just that the Great Wei does not dare to gamble with tens of thousands of southern prefecture soldiers. So what?" Emperor Wenshuan asked. 3,000. Xiao Ju raised his head. There were hundreds of thousands of southern barbarians. 3,000 against 100,000. No one would accept this proposal. This was a war they would lose. Emperor Wenshuan took a sip of tea. He understood. Su Jingfu made this request on the surface to make Xiao Ju back down. Bringing 3,000 soldiers to fight the southern barbarians was not forcing him. It was a fool's dream. As long as Xiao Ju did not want to die, he would not agree. He put down the teacup in his hand and looked at the stubborn young man. "Xiao Huaijin, if you insist on going, I will only give you 3,000 soldiers. Are you still willing to go?" Su Jingfu hid his hands in his sleeves and watched from the sidelines. He would not agree. The young man slowly lowered his head and kowtowed to Emperor Wenshuan. "This subject thanks your majesty for your grace." Everyone in the hall was stunned. When Xiao Ju raised his eyes again, his expression was calm. "A monarch does not joke. 3,000 it is." The heavy snow pressed down on the bare branches, and with a crack, the branches broke. Lin Xuanhe was in a daze. It had been a long time since he found out that Xiao Ju had brought 3,000 soldiers to Mingshui. It had been so long that the Battle of Guo City and the scholars had cursed Xiao Ju behind his back. It had been so long that Xiao Huaijin had become De Wei's god of war, General Fengyun. It had been so long that the two of them had not seen each other for 2 years. The affairs of the world were unpredictable, and there were many different opinions. However, no one knew how the young man felt when he left the city with 3,000 soldiers and found out that he was facing an army of 100,000. Xiao Rubi did not know that Xiao Ju had drugged him and entered the palace in the middle of the night to ask for 3,000 soldiers. He thought that the emperor had handed the southern barbarians to Xiao Ju and that Xiao Ju had temporary military power. Everyone cursed Xiao Ju behind his back. They cursed him for fighting for power. They cursed him for entering the palace before the 7th day of his mother's death. They cursed him for deceiving the emperor and handing the southern barbarians to a young man. How ridiculous was that? Who was the one who was being ridiculous? How ridiculous was this world? Xiao Ju left the city in the middle of the night. No one knew the look in his eyes before he left, and no one knew what he was thinking. Countless interesting things happened in the capital every day. Some people sighed at the Xiao family's misfortune, while others took pleasure in it. However, it only lasted for a few days. After a month, there were very few people who mentioned it. After a few more months, it had long been forgotten by people, until the news of the Battle of Long Valley came. Second young Master Xiao had led the southern barbarians to take down Guo City and drown 60,000 southern barbarians. The whole nation was shocked. They were shocked by the young man's surprise attack and how ruthless he was at such a young age. Everyone thought that he could have used a gentler method to capture the captives. Who knew that there were civilians among the 60,000 who drowned? But what could they do? 3,000 against 100,000. He rubbed a small bump on the bamboo stick and pressed it gently. His hand hurt. He has no other choice. Lin Shuang smiled. That's right. No one would use such a method unless they were forced into a dead end. The southern barbarians were stationed in Guo City. Xiao Zhongwu had been attacking for a long time, but he couldn't defeat them. Now that he had 3,000 soldiers, it was even more impossible for him to fight them head-on. Xiao Ju ordered the 3,000 soldiers to secretly build a dam 100 miles east of Guo City to block the water from the East Mountain Long Valley. When the water accumulated and turned into a vast ocean, he ordered the dam to be breached. Fei Nu asked, "Young master, you must think carefully. If this goes on, everyone will curse you behind your back. Even if they won by drowning Guo City, it would leave a cruel mark in the history books." All the generals and soldiers had always wanted to be remembered in history and be famous for 1,000 years. Moreover, the emperor advocated benevolence and didn't like to kill indiscriminately. This kind of victory meant that they had to bear more than they could gain. The young man sat under a tree and looked in the direction of Guo City in the distance. He stroked a weed in front of him and said self-mockingly, "Do I have any other choice?" Fei Nu didn't speak. "It doesn't matter what others say about me." He stood up, his black cloak leaving a trail behind him. "Open the dam." Fei Nu didn't speak or move. The young man walked forward and said coldly, "I said, open the dam." Thousands of feet of water flowed down. Guo City was submerged. The water poured in from the east and came out from the west. The barbarian soldiers and civilians in the south couldn't escape. All 60,000 people drowned. The city fell, and Xiao Ju won without a fight. When the news reached the imperial court, Emperor Wen Xuan was also shocked. After Xiao Zhongwu's death, the officials who supported the Xiao family were suppressed by Prime Minister Su's party. Now that Xiao Ju had won, they could hold their heads up high. Xiao Ju took the opportunity to submit a letter asking Emperor Wen Xuan to hand over the Southern House soldiers to him so that he could wipe out the southern barbarians in one go. Emperor Wen Xuan delegated power bit by bit. Xiao Ju's victories were also one battle after another. In the past few years, the southern barbarians had been defeated by him again and again. In the end, they were utterly defeated. The young man who led 3,000 people out of the city alone at night had finally become the frightening General Feng Yun in the eyes of the world. No one cared about the truth anymore. What people cared about was the fact that he had been greedy for military exploits, treated human lives like grass, and slaughtered at will. What he cared about was that he was arrogant, domineering, and looked down on everyone else. He even chopped down the only son of the Minister of Revenue without any mercy. But was he willing to be like this? When they were young, they went to school together in the Xianchang school and read, "The young man has his own arrogance. He despises the Kunlun sect and laughs at Lu Liang." He sharpened his sword for many years and showed his edge today. How spirited and handsome he was. In the years that followed, he was no longer as bright as he was then. The handsome young man in a white robe and a silver crown became the jade-faced killing general in black clothes and black armor. This was not something to be celebrated. From the beginning to the end, he was just one person. The snow fell even harder. It was so heavy that just by standing on the spot, one could already feel the chill. Their feet would leave clear footprints on the snow, but it wouldn't be long before they would be covered by the snow, leaving no traces behind. I don't know. At that time, the governor only led 3,000 people in the Battle of Gua City, Yin said. Do you know how the Nine Flags Battalion came to be? Lin Shuanga asked. Yin shook his head. His Majesty asked the Xiaoju to pick 3,000 people from the South Mansion Army. This was his last mercy to Huaijin. Huaijin stood in front of the South Mansion Army and asked them to choose whether they were willing to follow him to Mingshui. Before they went, no one thought that they would win the battle. They were going to die. Everyone who stood out had the determination to die and followed the general's son. The first 800 people who stood out later became the Nine Flags Battalion, he said with a smile. No wonder. Yin understood why the Xiaoju did not easily accept people into the Nine Flags Battalion. No matter how outstanding, brave, smart, and capable they were, they could not compare to the friendship they had built up in the past. Even if they were injured in the Nine Flags Battalion and could not go to the battlefield again, the Xiaoju would help them settle down. Because it was worth it. I didn't know about this at that time. Lin Shuanghe reached out and brushed away a snowflake that had landed on his body. Later, when grandfather was treating the Empress Dowager told him about it. Grandfather then told me that there were many rumors in the imperial court. After piecing them together, we formed the original outline of the situation. Didn't military Governor Xiao tell you about this? Yin asked. She remembered that when she entered the Xianchang school, Xiaoju, Lin Shuanghe, and another young man were very close. When Xiaoju was in trouble, he would tell his friend about it. To be honest, I only met him a few times in the past few years. Lin Shuanghe shook his head. The few times he wrote to me, he wanted to borrow money. Borrow money? You didn't expect that, right? When Lin Shuanghe said this, his tone became more relaxed. Xiao family's original silver was confiscated when General Guangwu was killed. When he led the troops to the south 2 years ago, he didn't have enough resources. Xiao family's eldest brother was an honest official. He couldn't bear to squeeze his brother dry, so he came to me. Our Lin family's medicine shops are all over the Dowei. We are loved by many noble ladies in the capital. He treated me as his father and gave him pocket money. Yin, even though he won many battles these years and got a lot of rewards and spoils of war, it's still not enough compared to what I borrowed from him. Lin Shuanghe smiled. Of course, I'm very generous. If he can't pay me back, then forget it. Yin, it's good to have a friend like you. These words were said with sincerity. Lin Shuanghe waved his hand modestly. You're too kind. That's why I was surprised when Xiaoju sent me a letter asking me to come to Liangzhou. Did the governor ask Dr. Lin to come to Liangzhou? Yin asked curiously. That's right. The letter said that one of his confidants had an eye injury and asked me to come and treat it. I thought it was Fei Nu Chi Wu who was injured. Halfway there was a letter saying that the persons I had recovered. Since I couldn't turn back halfway, I heard that he was in Qingnan. So I changed my route and went there to meet him. I also followed him to the Liangzhou guard to see where he lives now. Yin was surprised. Xiaoju's letter said, confidant with an eye injury. It must be her. She had been injured by the assassin at Sun Xiangfu's banquet. However, she quickly realized that it wasn't serious. At that time, she didn't know that Xiaoju had already asked Lin Shuanghe to come and treat her. Although Lin Shuanghe only looked at women, he was Lin Qingtan's grandson. His medical skills were superb, and no one dared to look down on him. This person wasn't as heartless as he made himself out to be. As the two of them talked, they had already arrived at Yan's door. Here, Lin Shuanghe handed Yan a robe. You can give this to him. Yan? Why me? Lin Shuanghe thought for a moment. Because Xiao Huaijin must be in a bad mood right now. If I go and join in the fun, I'll be scolded. But you're different. He leaned closer to Yan and whispered, if a cute and obedient girl goes, he'll control his temper and won't make things difficult for you. Yan's lips twitched. Dr. Lin, do you think Military Governor Xiao is the kind of person who'll have tender feelings for the fair sex? Moreover, in Xiaoju's mind, She wasn't cute and obedient at all. Of course, why wouldn't he be? Lin Shuanghe looked at her with a smile and gently pushed her into the room. He didn't chase you out of the Liangzhou guards immediately after discovering your identity. This proves that he treats you well. Go be careful. Don't fall. Hien, wait. I'll come see you tomorrow. Hien was pushed into his room. The door was closed behind him, and the room was empty. The food that Cheng Lisu and Song Taodao had brought over was still by the bed. Hien walked over with the support of a stick and sat down on the bed. The black robe was next to his hand. Hien looked at the other side of the door. He wondered if Xiao Ju was there right now. If she was, wouldn't it be a bit awkward for her to just give him the food? The window was open, and the salt-like snow drifted into the room with the wind. The young governor stood in front of the window and looked at the wind and snow outside. In the dungeon, Lei Ho's words rang in his ears. The snow grew heavier and heavier, almost blinding his eyes. The light in his eyes gradually dimmed. When he was young, he had learned martial arts from a master in the mountains. Before he left the mountains, the master had said to him, "You will walk on a very difficult path. You must walk on alone and never look back." He was young then and didn't understand what this meant. It wasn't until the huge waves of fate came crashing down and overturned the boat that carried the youth's hopes. As he floated alone in the sea, he suddenly understood. So that's how it was. Xiao Zhongwu only had 2 sons. Xiao Jing was like a flawless white jade, pure and noble. How could he participate in this kind of thing? If one of them had to walk on this path and bear the burden of murder, misunderstanding, infamy, and loneliness, why not let him do it? He didn't care. So many years had passed. He didn't care about misunderstandings, nor was he afraid of being questioned. How could he lose something he had never owned? But this kind of snowy day was too cold. Creak! A sound came from behind him. Xiao Ju turned around, and a head popped out from behind the door. He struggled to walk in with a stick, holding his pajamas in his hands. "Sorry," the youth said sincerely. "I just knocked on the door, but you didn't respond, so I—" "Xiao Ju, so you picked the lock and came in uninvited?" Hien said embarrassedly. "Don't be angry. We're all neighbors." She sneezed. "Achoo. Why didn't you close the window? It's so cold." How could she say something like, "We're all neighbors," so calmly? Xiao Ju didn't bother to pay attention to her and closed the window. Hien also felt wronged. She knocked on the door for a long time, but Xiao Ju ignored her. She thought that Xiao Ju wasn't home. She thought that it was good that she didn't bump into Xiao Ju when he was in a bad mood. She might as well use this opportunity to secretly pick the lock, sneak in, put down the pajamas, and leave. She didn't have to think about how to comfort him when they met. But this person was in the house, and he still ignored her. It was too disrespectful. "Commander-in-Chief, your pajamas." Hien handed the pajamas to him. Xiao Ju looked at her. "Just put it on the couch." Hien said, "Oh," and put it on the couch. She then sat down on a stool in the house. She saw that this person was still standing in the same place, thinking about something. She guessed that he was still upset about what Lei Ho said in the dungeon. She couldn't help but sympathize with him. During her years in the Fuyue army, she didn't know that Xiao Ju had such a difficult life. If it was her, then so be it. Hien never felt that she was special, but if this kind of thing happened to Xiao Ju, then she felt that the heavens were too cruel. It turned out that God wasn't Xiao Ju's biological father. He had to take away what he had given her. He was even an unscrupulous businessman who never made a loss. She tried to find something to talk about. "Commander-in-Chief, I see that your pajamas are really beautiful. Where did you buy it? How much did it cost?" Xiao Ju said, "The palace gave it to me." This person obviously didn't want to talk to her anymore. That was why he deliberately made it difficult for her to continue the conversation. Hien hesitated whether to leave or not. She thought about the medicine that Xiao Ju gave her when she was injured and sighed in her heart. She was a person who would take revenge for revenge and repay kindness for kindness. Now that Xiao Ju was in a bad mood, it would be disloyal to her if she left just like that. "Commander-in-Chief, the wound on my waist hurts." Hien changed the topic, trying to attract his attention to something else. "Will it leave any side effects in the future?" "Hurts?" Xiao Ju sat down in front of the table and said indifferently, I see that you can get out of bed and walk around. It shouldn't be a big problem. Yin, she said, Commander-in-Chief, you can't vent your dissatisfaction with Lei Ho on me. This person was like a firecracker now. She couldn't even talk properly. Xiao Ju flipped through the pages in front of him and said without turning his head, You think too much. Yin looked at him. It was probably the report sent by the Liangzhou guards about the attack on Rendezvous and the number of casualties. He sat in front of the table and carefully flipped through it. Xiao Ju didn't have it easy. Yin thought to himself. He first went to Qingnan and rushed back with the Nanfu army. He led the army to destroy Rendezvous soldiers and then helped the injured soldiers settle down. Then he went to interrogate Lei Ho. After that, he was scolded by Lei Ho. Now he came back to continue reading the military report. He didn't stop for a moment. Yin was injured, but at least he had a good night's sleep. This person, on the other hand, didn't rest from beginning to end. But when he was in the Xianchang Hall, he liked to laze around. So even Xiao Ju couldn't avoid it. His back was always as straight as a tree, as if he would never get tired. But in fact, he would get tired. Yin sat in the chair and looked at his back. He said, Commander-in-Chief, don't take Lei Ho's words to heart. Yin didn't hear Xiao Ju's reply, but he didn't care. He continued, He's the enemy. Of course he's happy to see you angry. Those words were purposely said to anger you. You're not the only one who was scolded. He also scolded me. He called me a sissy. Yin started to talk nonsense again. He also said that I have a hidden disease and that my fiancé will run away with someone sooner or later. I'm all alone and will end up in the east of the city with no one to buy tofu. This kind of consolation was really lame. After Yin finished speaking, he felt that he didn't put in the effort. But what could she do? She was rarely comforted by others, so she didn't know how to comfort others. There was no right or wrong in some things. You had to make the right decision based on your position. Outsiders couldn't understand the feeling of shouldering everything alone. It wasn't a good feeling. She had experienced it before, so she could understand Xiao Ju's feelings. Xiao Ju still couldn't be bothered with him. Her eyes didn't move away from the military report in front of her. Yin stood up, leaned on the staff, and walked to his side with difficulty. Her right hand clenched into a fist and landed on his desk. I'll give you something, she said. I'm leaving. She slowly dragged her feet back to her room and closed the door. After Yin left, Xiao Ju stopped what she was doing and looked at the table. There was a sesame candy lying on the spot where her palm was just now. It looked very sweet. Chapter 118. After the incident with Rendezvous, the Liangzhou guards were very busy for a period of time. After the new soldiers who died in battle were buried, their names were recorded in the military registry. When they returned to the capital in the future, they had to pay compensation to the families of the new soldiers. The new soldiers who died were all sentinels, and most of them were still very young. They had died in battle less than a year after coming to the Liangzhou guards. Their companions who spent all their time together were also very depressed for a period of time. However, even though they were depressed, their days still had to go on. Especially after this incident, the Liangzhou guards were not as safe as before. Xiao Ju ordered Chief Instructor Shun to begin training the new formations. If they really encountered an enemy, the new soldiers had to learn how to set up formations to be able to kill the enemy. Not all of the Nanfu soldiers had arrived in Liangzhou. When Xiao Ju rushed back from Qingnan, she brought 10,000 Nanfu soldiers with her. The Nine Flags Battalion remained in Qingnan and did not follow. Now that Liangzhou City had become the target of public criticism, it was not a good time to be in the limelight. The Nanfu soldiers' daily training was different from the Liangzhou Guard daily training. Just as Xiao Ju said, the length and amount of daily training was 3 times that of the Liangzhou Guards. Every time the new soldiers of the Liangzhou Guard saw the Nanfu soldiers' daily training, they couldn't help but sigh in admiration. In an instant, the originally empty training grounds became lively. At the foot of White Moon Mountain, by the Wulu River, there were soldiers everywhere. Yan's injuries were also getting better day by day. Lin Xuanhe's medical skills were much more exquisite than Shen Mushue's. He originally thought that such an injury would take him a year or so to recover. Now, at this rate, He Yin felt that he could still go to the training grounds and jump around in 2 months. Song Tao Dao placed the soup in front of He Yin. After watching He Yin drink it all, she took the bowl and left. The little girl didn't know how to cook, so she went to the head of the soldiers and used her status as a young miss to rob them. The food she robbed was to feed He Yin. He Yin sometimes felt like he was living off a woman. At first, he was a bit embarrassed, but after a while, he became used to it. After all, the soup was delicious. It would be even better if the little girl didn't look at her as if she was looking at her own treasure. From the other side of the room, a faint voice could be heard. It seemed to be Liang Ping's, and he sounded a little excited. He Yin thought about it for a while, then got up and got out of bed with the help of a stick. She took out a silver thread from her sleeve and inserted it into the lock. She had done this kind of thing many times, so it was a walk in the park for her. Fortunately, Xiaoju turned a blind eye to her behavior and did not change the lock to a more complicated sure character. Xiaoju's important documents were probably not in this room, which was why it was so loose. He Yin pushed open the door slightly and saw a person kneeling in front of Xiaoju. It was Du Mao, whom he had not seen for a long time. Ever since the incident with Rida Musi, Lei Ho's identity as a spy was exposed. As Lei Ho's relative, the original sponsor, Du Mao, had disappeared without a trace. He Yin heard Cheng Lisu say that Du Mao seemed to have been locked up. He Yin could understand. Since Lei Ho was a spy, no one could guarantee that Du Mao was innocent. Now that Du Mao appeared here, it was probably because the injustice had been cleared. In addition to the kneeling Du Mao, there was also a group of instructors standing in the room. He Yin saw Liang Ping step forward and plead, "Commander-in-Chief, Instructor Du and Lei Ho haven't seen each other for many years." He really didn't know that Lei Ho was a spy. "Please, Commander-in-Chief, give him a way out." "That's right, Commander-in-Chief," Ma Damei couldn't help but say. Instructor Du has been in the Liangzhou Guards for 10 years and has never made a single mistake. If Lei Ho didn't intentionally hide it, he wouldn't have ended up like this. "Please, Commander-in-Chief, take into account Instructor Du's hard work for so many years and give him a lighter punishment." The other instructors all agreed and pleaded for Du Mao. Du Mao had been in the Liangzhou Guard since he was in his 20s. He had stayed in the bitter cold for 10 years. There wasn't much to play around in the guard station. At most, the instructors would gather together to drink wine during festivals. What they did on a daily basis was either training soldiers or guarding the station. The instructors had deep friendships and naturally didn't want to see Du Mao lose his life because of Lei Ho. They couldn't bear it and came to plead for leniency. Shen Han's lips moved, but he didn't say anything in the end. It wasn't that he didn't have a deep relationship with Du Mao, but even though they had only known each other for less than a year, Shen Han knew that the second young Master Xiao in front of him wasn't someone who would change his mind because of someone else's words. As expected, Xiaoju didn't pay attention to what the others were saying. He looked at Du Mao and said, "What do you plan to do?" He Yin still remembered that when he had first arrived at the Liangzhou Guards, this instructor, Du Mao, had a good relationship with Liang Ping and often argued with Liang Ping. Among the instructors, he was considered young. Now, in just a few short days, he seemed to have aged 10 years. A few strands of white hair had sprouted from his temples, and his expression had aged considerably. Du Mao opened his mouth, unable to hide the exhaustion in his voice. Du Mao is willing to accept punishment. Du Mao! Liang Ping anxiously called out his name. "I didn't find out Lei Ho's current status before rashly recommending him to the guard station. This is dereliction of duty," Du Mao said. "It is only right for the governor to punish me." "You are indeed dereliction of duty," Xiaoju said calmly. "Because of you, many new recruits have died in the Liangzhou Guards." The instructors who wanted to continue persuading him stopped in their tracks and didn't dare open their mouths. "The dead cannot be revived," Xiaoju said. "Do you understand?" Du Mao understands. The room was silent. Liang Ping looked at Du Mao with a look of despair. "I won't take your life." As soon as he said this, everyone in the room was stunned. Yin was also stunned. Xiao Ju said, "You can leave, Governor. From today onwards, you are no longer an instructor of the Liangzhou guards." Xiao Ju stood up and walked out of the room. "You don't have to come back in the future." His figure disappeared outside the room. After a moment of silence, Ma Damii finally came to her senses and pulled Du Mao, who was still kneeling on the ground. Okay. The governor has shown you mercy. Hurry up and get up." Du Mao stood in a daze and suddenly began to wail. Everyone in the room comforted him and Du Mao's cries. The noise made Yan's head hurt. She grabbed her clothes and casually put them on. Leaning on a stick, she followed him out of the room. As soon as she stepped out, she shivered from the cold wind and snow outside. "Where's Xiao Ju?" Ian looked around. This person had just left the room. How could she be gone now? Could she fly? "Looking for me?" Someone's voice came from behind. Ian was so scared that she gasped and almost dropped the stick in her hand. She turned around and saw Xiao Ju standing behind her. She raised her eyebrows and stared at her. "What's the matter?" "No, nothing." Ian pretended to look at the sky. "The weather is very good. I came out for a walk." Xiao Ju glanced at the sand like snow outside and said mockingly, "I thought you didn't eavesdrop enough and wanted to ask me something in person." He actually knew that she was eavesdropping? That was awkward. Ian scratched her head. "The governor's hearing is very good." Xiao Ju smiled. "Not as good as yours." "Tell me," he asked, "why are you looking for me?" Why was she looking for him? Ian didn't know either. She just followed him out subconsciously. She was speechless for a moment. After thinking for a while, she said, "Governor, you still showed mercy to Instructor Du." It was one thing for the instructors to have a close personal relationship with Du Mao, but it was another thing for Du Mao to make a mistake. Ian thought that with Xiao Ju's personality, Du Mao wouldn't be able to escape death. She didn't expect that in the end, he would only be expelled from the Liangzhou guards. Xiao Ju laughed. She seemed to think that her words were funny. "Showed mercy? Yes, if it were me. What would you do if it were you?" Ian suddenly couldn't say anything. What would she do if it were her? It wasn't that she had never encountered such a situation when she was a junior soldier, a deputy general, and then a general. In fact, General Fei Hong wasn't any more merciful than Xiao Ju. However, most of the time, others subconsciously ignored it. It was only because she usually fought with her subordinates that she didn't have any merciless, great achievements like Xiao Ju. If it were her, would she give the order to take Du Mao's life? "If it were me, I wouldn't either," Yin said. "Taking Du Mao's life seems like a strict military order, but in reality, it hurts people's hearts. The Liangzhou guards just went through the Rida Musi incident. If people's hearts are scattered, the Liangzhou guards will be like a plate of loose sand. It will be difficult for them to stand up." Xiao Ju looked at her with a bit of surprise. "That's right," Yin said proudly. "I already said that I'm the #1 Liangzhou guards. I'm very smart. How about it, Commander-in-Chief? Can you let me enter the 9 Flags Battalion?" Xiao Ju curled the corner of her mouth. No, this person was really stubborn. Yin was about to argue for herself when she saw him turn around and continue walking forward. Yin followed him with a stick and asked, "Where are you going, Commander-in-Chief?" "The training field." "Are you going to watch the soldiers train?" Yin said, "I'm going too." After she was injured, she naturally couldn't train with them. Every day, other than lying on the bed, she would walk 2 laps outside the house with a stick. It was really boring. Even though Song Tao Tao and Chung Li Su took the opportunity to come over and talk to her, between the two of them, one only remembered trivial things like which girl in the capital was beautiful and which madam liked Lin, while the other didn't know anything other than eating, drinking, and playing. He had a hard time talking to them. The only one who could talk to her was Lin Shuanghe. He was even invited by Shun Muxue to the medical hall to help brew medicine for the injured soldiers. Therefore, when Xiao Ju said that they were going to the training field, Yin was a bit restless. The snow had lessened, and it wasn't as cold outside as before. Yin couldn't walk fast with the stick and complained, "Commander-in-Chief, wait for me." Xiao Ju couldn't help but stop in his tracks when he heard her confident tone. He asked, "Am I your servant?" "No." Yin came back to his senses and explained, "What I mean is we can walk slower and talk about other things." Cough. Did Leiho say why Rida Musi came to find trouble with us? Wasn't the Western Chong rebellion quelled by General Fei Hong a long time ago? Where did the Chong tribe get so many soldiers? Tens of thousands of soldiers. Did the Chong tribe have so many soldiers now? He Yin had fought with Raidamuji before and was very familiar with the Chong tribe situation. He felt that something was wrong. It's not the Chong tribe. Xiao Ju rarely answered He Yan's question. It's Yudo. Yudo? This time He Yan really didn't expect it. Xiao Ju glanced at her and saw her surprised expression. She said lightly, "What do you think?" Was she testing her? He Yan asked, "Is Raidamuzi a Yudo?" Xiao Ju was speechless for a moment before saying, "He's not a Yudo, but other than Raidamuzi and a few of your trusted subordinates, the rest of the soldiers are Yudo. Commander-in-Chief, are you sure?" Xiao Ju walked forward unhurriedly. "I'm sure. If it's really a Yudo," He Yan's voice was serious, "then what the Yudo wants is not just a Liangzhou guard." "What do you mean?" "In recent years, the Yudo kingdom has raised soldiers and is very powerful. They always harass the people at the border with the intention of testing us. Now that they've come to the Liangzhou guard, they use the Chong tribe as an excuse to hide themselves in the dark. They want to use the Chong tribe's name to run amok and away. Commander-in-Chief, think about it. If you really went to Zhangtai and couldn't save them in time, when those Yudo took over the Liangzhou guard and took over the city, Liangzhou city would be taken over by the Yudo. It would be like tearing a hole into Wei's border. They could go all the way west and follow the river until they reach the capital." Xiao Ju looked up. "That's all? I'm afraid there's a traitor in Wei." He Yin said, "This person has Yudo connections and is an old acquaintance of the commander-in-chief." Xiao Ju said, "Continue. To be able to secretly plant a trusted aide in the Liangzhou guard and spread fake news in Zhangtai. This person's status is not low, and he has a wide network. He knows that the commander-in-chief is impregnable in the Liangzhou guard, so he first lured you away. This person must be very afraid of you. Therefore," He Yin looked at Xiao Ju, "perhaps there is such a person who has a very high position in the imperial court and has fought with the governor in the past but did not gain any advantage. If there is such a person, there is an 80 to 90% chance that he did it." Xiao Ju stared at him and said, "Then why don't you tell me who this person is?" He Yin felt that it was really strange. Although he and Xiao Ju were classmates, it was only for a year. After that, they hadn't seen each other for many years. One was in the south and the other was in the north. Because of Xiao Zhongwu's matter, Xiao Ju was deeply embroiled in the whirlpool of the imperial court. However, she was a pure and innocent person who relied on military merits to forcefully rise in rank. Every day, she stayed in the border camp, so she didn't know much about the messy affairs of the imperial court. How could she guess who that person was? Even if it was an examination, it was too difficult. Not everyone was like him, who could sleep and become the number one in the Xianchang dojo. Thinking about Yuan Baozhen, He Yin said casually, "Su Jingfu." Xiao Ju was stunned. He Yin saw his expression and his heart jumped. "It's really him?" Xiao Ju didn't answer. Su Jingfu actually colluded with the enemy and committed treason? He Yin was shocked. He's crazy. He's the prime minister of the court. What good would it do him to do such a thing? "You can speak louder," Xiao Ju said indifferently. "If there is no evidence, I can sue you any time for slandering an official of the court." He Yin thought, who isn't an official of the court? In her previous life, when she was a General Fei Hong, she was also paid by the government. But, she wanted to say something, but Xiao Ju had already stopped and walked forward. Not far away, the sound of soldiers shouting and getting into formation could be heard. Unknowingly, the two of them had already walked to the practice field. The practice field used to only be used by the Liang Province Guard recruits for daily training. Now it was split into two sides. The east side was used by the Nanfu soldiers, while the west side was used by the Liang Province Guard. Now that both sides were training at the same time, the difference was obvious. The deputy commander of the Nanfu soldiers was practicing his footwork. He didn't need anyone to direct him. Just looking at him made people feel that he was brave and invincible. On the other hand, the Liang Province Guard recruits had just started learning how to get into formation. It was inevitable that they were a bit flustered. Shen Han stood on the high platform and shouted with all his might. Hien looked and hesitated. They're practicing the fish scale formation? Xiao Zhu glanced at her and asked, It's here to test people again. Hien didn't understand Xiao Zhu's questions from time to time, but she thought that maybe he was trying to test whether she could enter the Nine Flags Battalion. She could only answer seriously. They're distributed in echelons. The front part is slightly raised, and the main force is gathered in the center. Then they're divided into small square formations shaped like fish scales. When facing the enemy, they can concentrate their forces to attack the center of the enemy formation. However, their weakness is at the rear. If the enemy breaks through from the rear, they can break this formation. It's a fish scale formation, but, she said, they're too loose. Too loose. If they were to slowly get into formation, they would have been killed 5 times over. Xiao Zhu looked at her thoughtfully. Suddenly, she curled her lips and said, Not bad. Hien was very proud. Her hard work paid off. Who would have thought that she, who was the last in the Xianchang dojo in the past, was now so familiar with the art of war that she could easily answer the questions of the first in the Xianchang dojo. Her hair hadn't turned white in the war, and she hadn't wasted her time studying. You've learned the art of war? Xiao Zhu raised her eyebrows. I know a little. You know how to set up formations? You flatter me. Good. Xiao Zhu looked at the soldiers training below the stage and said, If the Muzi came to the Liangzhou Guard that day, and you weren't locked in the dungeon, and Shen Han gave you command of the army, how would you fight this battle? She was going to give him a question so soon? Hien thought for a moment and said slowly, Those Yudo soldiers are strong and vicious. The new recruits of the Liangzhou Guard haven't been to the battlefield yet, so their morale is low. It's hard to fight them head-on, and it's not something that can be solved in a short time. If it was me, I would use the carriage formation. Xiao Zhu looked at her calmly. Go on. As the main general, I would be in the center of the formation. The soldiers outside would be arranged layer by layer. The soldiers would be scattered outside, forming a roving formation. When the battle starts, they would rotate in the same direction and take turns attacking the enemy's formation, just like a spinning wheel. In this way, if we don't constantly exert pressure on the enemy, the Yudo will collapse from exhaustion. Our side will be replenished and rested by taking turns to attack, and we'll recover our fighting strength. You're the main general? Xiao Zhu mocked. What I mean is, I'll temporarily be the main general. The one who really needs to fight is still you, Commander. The reason why I chose the carriage formation is to stall for time, so that you can rush back to support us, Hien said sincerely. Xiao Zhu turned around and bent down slightly. She looked down at her and smiled. Lady, he's learned the art of war well. It's a pity that he's not a general. No matter what, Xiao Zhu had a pretty good eye. Hien nodded and said, I think so too. I feel that I was born to be a general. Sometimes I even feel that I was a female general in my previous life. Xiao Zhu. Commander, you don't believe me? Hien poked a hole in the snow with a stick. Or do you think that women can't be generals? I don't think so. Hien raised her head and looked at him. Everyone thought that women should stay in the boudoir, embroider, draw eyebrows, and wait for their husbands to favor them. Not to mention being a female general. Even if they were to appear in public as a female shopkeeper, a female teacher, or a female doctor, they would receive strange looks from many people. There were very few who could take that step. Even if they did, others would not understand. You can do whatever you want. The young man's eyes were lazy and the corners of his mouth twitched. As long as you can do it, it's fine. Hien was stunned for a moment and stared at him without saying anything. His gaze fell on the training field in the distance and the recruits who were training. He did not see Hien's gaze behind him. Thank you, Hien said softly in her heart. The snow gradually stopped. The recruits led by Shen Han practiced a few times and were not as flustered as they were at the beginning. Seeing the initial results, Xiao Zhu and Hien also stood here for a long time. A familiar voice sounded behind them. Why, Jean? Brother? Tian turned around and saw Lin Shuanghe. Lin Shuanghe climbed up to the attic and brushed the snow off his boots. No wonder I couldn't find you two anywhere. So you came here. He looked at Xiao Ju and smiled mischievously. You brought our sister He here to watch the training? Tian? Dr. Lin, please don't call me sister outside. I'm sorry. Lin Shuanghe covered his mouth with his fan and apologized. I forgot, but there are no outsiders here. He glanced at the stick Yin was holding and asked, Can you get out of bed and walk so far today? How is it? Does your wound still hurt? It doesn't hurt too much, Yin said. Dr. Lin's medical skills are superb. I feel much better today. That's great. Lin Shuanghe waved his fan. If I can't cure you, I will feel very guilty. The two of them complimented each other. Xiao Ju looked on coldly from the side. She couldn't stand it anymore and said impatiently, If you have something to say, say it. Lin Shuanghe was stunned. I almost forgot about the important matter. Someone from the Liangzhou guards just came. I wanted to find Xin Jiaodou, but Xin Jiaodou wasn't here. It took me a long time to find you here. Who is it? Someone from the palace said that His Majesty will reward you for the great victory of the Liangzhou guards. All right, there's also that. He couldn't remember who it was. It took him a while to remember the name. The fourth son of Count Shi Jin's residence, Chu Xilan. That's right, Chu Xilan is here too. Chu Zhao. Xiao Ju frowned. What's he doing here? Lin Shuanghe shrugged. How would I know? They're all waiting at the entrance of the guards. Aren't you going to take a look? Xiao Ju paused, then walked down the stairs. Let's go. Commander-in-Chief. What about me? Tian hurriedly leaned on his stick. He wanted to follow, but he didn't know if he could. Xiao Ju didn't look like an old friend catching up. Xiao Ju looked at him and said, You can go back. There's no need to follow. Oh. Tian obediently agreed. Lin Shuanghe waved his hand at him. The two of them quickly went down the stairs, their figures disappearing into the distance. Tian looked at the vast expanse of snow. He was a bit confused. Who exactly was this person called Chu Xilan? Chapter 119. There was a group of people standing outside the garrison. The servants beside the carriages were unloading boxes from the carriages and were extremely busy. The guests were sitting and drinking tea in the resting area outside the garrison. As soon as Xiao Ju entered, she saw Liang Ping pouring tea for the guests. Fourth young Master Chu. The first to greet him was Lin Shuanghe. He waved his fan and walked forward as if he were a host greeting a guest. Is the tea to your liking? Chu Xilan stood up and cupped his hands in greeting to Lin Shuanghe and Xiao Ju. Military Governor Xiao, young Master Lin. He smiled and said, The Liang Province Garrison's Yunwu tea is mellow and elegant, leaving a lingering fragrance on the teeth and cheeks. Governor, you're so lucky. Xiao Ju pulled over a chair and sat down. She stared at him and said, It's just some coarse tea. No need to be so polite. Chu Xilan was not angry. He only smiled and said, Governor, you are joking. The fourth young master of Shi Jinbo's household was about the same age as Xiao Ju. Compared to Xiao Ju's usual indifferent and lazy expression, he appeared much gentler. He was also very good-looking. His facial features were delicate, his skin was fair, and he wore a loose, jade-colored robe. He appeared even thinner than before. His eyes were long and narrow, and he always had a smile on his face. He was truly an elegant gentleman, as gentle as jade. The two of them stood together. One was as cold as autumn water, the other as bright and clear as an orchid. It was a very pleasing sight to behold. Beside Chu Zhao stood a girl who looked like a maidservant. Although she was wearing the clothes of a maidservant, she was exceptionally beautiful. Her facial features were deep and bright. Even though she was wearing plain clothes, it was difficult to conceal her beauty. Lin Shuanghe was used to seeing beautiful women, but when he saw this girl's appearance, he couldn't help but be dazzled. He sighed inwardly. When master and servant stood together, they did not look like people of the mortal world. Of Shi Jinbo's 4 sons, the first 3 had average looks. Only this one looked so beautiful. It seemed that a mother's appearance was very important. Fourth young Master Chu, why have you come to the Liang State Guard? Xiao Ju asked. Chu Zhao laughed and said, His Majesty heard that military governor Xiao has annihilated tens of thousands of enemy troops in the Liangzhou Guard and eradicated the remaining evildoers of the Chang tribe. His Majesty's dragon countenance was greatly pleased and specially sent me to deliver the reward, while at the same time, he wanted to see the morale of the Liangzhou Guard. Reward? Xiao Ju looked at him playfully and said carelessly, Liangzhou is a cold and bitter place. For fourth young Master Chu to lower himself to come and watch, he smiled, It's not simple. Chu Zhao said, It is Xylan's fortune to be able to see the mighty army led by military governor Xiao with her own eyes. Xiao Ju laughed, but didn't say anything. His Majesty also ordered me to hold a banquet to celebrate our victory in Liang Province. Chu Zhao said, However, I am not clear on how the Liang Province Guard normally celebrates. Therefore, I can only trouble the commander-in-chief. The new recruits who died in battle have just been buried, Xiao Ju said. I'm afraid it's not very appropriate to celebrate now. Chu Zhao's smile was gentle, but his tone was firm. How can there not be blood in war? Besides, annihilating the enemy is a joyous occasion. Rewards should be rewarded. This is also His Majesty's intention. Was he using the Emperor Wen Xuan's name? Xiao Ju stared at him for a while. After a while, he nodded and smiled. All right. He stood up and said meaningfully, We can hold a celebration banquet tomorrow. Fourth young Master Chu, please come and join us. Chu Zhao stood up and returned the salute. Deference is no substitute for obedience. Xiao Ju left the room and ordered Fei Nu, arrange a room for fourth young Master Chu's people. Fei Nu accepted the order and left. Lin Shuanga followed him out and moved closer to him. He asked in a low voice, What did Chu Zhao come here for? From the looks of it, is he going to stay in the Liang Province Guard for a while? Su Jingfu is anxious now that he's gone, Xiao Ju said calmly. He sent his dog over to take a look. Is there a problem? Lin Shuanga looked back at the room and saw Chu Zhao drinking tea with his head lowered. He asked, Isn't it a bit unsafe for him to stay here? After all, this guy is Su Jingfu's man. Unsafe? Xiao Ju said, That depends on his ability. Let's go. Where are we going? Since it's a reward, we should see what's inside. Xiao Ju said playfully. He came to the Liang Province Guard with such great fanfare. It's just a few boxes of rewards. Isn't that a bit unreasonable? You want to take advantage of this opportunity again? Xiao Ju glanced at him. Lin Shuanga said, I don't mean anything else. I'm just asking. Don't be angry. Let's go see the treasures. He Yin returned from the martial arts practice field and returned to his idle state. He lay on the bed and read a few travel books while waiting for Song Taodao to bring him food. After eating, Song Taodao was about to leave when he heard some movement outside the door. It seemed that Song Taodao was talking to someone. He thought that Xiao Ju had returned, so he got off the bed and opened the door. He saw Lin Shuanghe immediately. Dr. Lin? Ian looked around but didn't see Xiao Ju. He asked, Is the commander-in-chief not here? He went to discuss the celebration banquet with the instructor. Lin Shuanghe smiled. I'll wait for him in the room. I have something to tell him. Celebration banquet? Ian was confused. What celebration banquet? The Liang Province Guard's celebration banquet. Lin Shuanghe waved at Song Taodao. After Song Taodao left, he walked towards Ian. However, when he reached the door, he suddenly stopped and didn't want to go any further. Ian was confused. What's wrong? Lin Shuanghe retracted his hand and said seriously, It's not good for a man and a woman to be in the same room. If word gets out, it will damage your reputation. Ian was speechless. She said, No one knows my identity here. Dr. Lin, you can just treat me as a normal recruit. Also, didn't you come here before? Lin Shuanghe waved his hand reservedly. There were other people in the room before. Now it's just the two of us. I'm afraid that it will cause a misunderstanding. What misunderstanding? Ian was helpless. I often stay in the same room as the commander-in-chief. There's nothing wrong with it. Lin Shuanghe took a step back. That's even more unacceptable. I can't play with my friend's wife. Do you think I'm a despicable person who would betray my friend? Yan was speechless. What kind of nonsense was this person spouting? She thought for a moment and finally came up with a good idea. How about this, young Master Lin? You go to the commander-in-chief's room, and I'll stay in my room. I'll open the middle door, and we'll talk through it. This way, we won't be in the same room, but in two separate rooms. How does this work? Lin Shuanghe didn't expect Yan to be able to do this. After a moment of surprise, he slapped his fan. Let's do it this way. Yan returned to his room and used Chung Lisu's silver thread to pry open the lock. He struggled to push a stool to the other side of the middle door. Lin Shuanghe was already waiting there. He looked at the middle door and asked Yan, "Do you usually play like this?" "How?" "Well," Lin Shuanghe seemed to feel embarrassed when he said this. He shook his head and smiled. "I didn't expect Huaijin to be like this as well." Yan was confused by his words, but he still remembered what he said about the celebratory feast. He asked, "Dr. Lin, what's the celebratory feast you mentioned earlier? Didn't you defeat Rendezvous' people and wipe out tens of thousands of enemy troops?" Lin Shuanghe said, "When His Majesty heard about this, he was very happy. He specially sent people to bring rewards to commend you. He also wants to hold a celebratory feast at the Liang Prefecture Guard to reward the three armies." Yan was stunned when he heard this. Now? It's not very good to celebrate now. It wasn't a good time to celebrate in the Liang Prefecture Guard. Although they won this battle, they came in a hurry. At the beginning, they didn't know what was going on, so dozens of sentries died. Even though they won in the end, it was mostly because of the support of the South Mansion soldiers. Compared to the joy of winning the battle, the feelings of these new soldiers right now were probably more of sadness and fear of the death of their comrades. How could it be good to celebrate at this time? What can we do about His Majesty's intentions? Lin Shuanghe sighed. How can we not appreciate his kindness? For a moment, neither of them spoke. After a while, Yan asked, "The person who came to deliver His Majesty's decree is the one you were talking about today, Chu's Island, right?" Yan asked, "Who is Chu's Island? You've never heard of Chu's Island?" This time, Lin Shuanghe was surprised. Yan shook his head. "Xiao Ruby is the #1 dream man in the capital. Xiao Huaijin is #2, and Chu's Island is #3. Lin Shuanghe sighed. However, ever since Xiao Ruby got married, there's only Xiao Huaijin and Chu's Island. Our Huaijin has a cold personality and doesn't like to talk to girls. In the past few years, he's not as good as Chu's Island. Although Chu's Island's background is a bit low, he's good-looking and gentle. He's not even engaged yet. If you ask the girls in the capital who they want to marry, they'll probably say Chu's Island." "What?" He looked at Yan. "You've never heard of him when you were in the capital? That's impossible." Of course, Yan didn't know. Previously, she had been leading troops into battle. How could she have the time to pay attention to the affairs of the heart or the handsome men in the capital? Later, she returned to the capital and quickly got married. She had no way of knowing about other men. Chu's Island really hadn't heard of him. "I've been raised in the boudoir by my father since I was young. I never left the house and rarely even spoke to other men," Yan said seriously. "I really don't know anything about the outside world." "Is that so?" Lin Shuanghe said. "Then your father is really strict with you." Yan nodded. "That's true." She asked, "What's the relationship between Chu's Island and military governor Xiao?" Xiao Ju wasn't close to people. She hadn't seen him like anyone, but she hadn't seen him hate anyone either. Su Jingfu was one of them. She hadn't seen Chu's Island today, but just hearing his name made Xiao Ju unhappy. Could it be that they had a grudge in the past? That's a long story. Lin Shuanghe stood up and poured himself a cup of tea. He drank the tea to moisten his throat before sitting down again. He said to Yan, "You haven't heard of Chu's Island, but have you heard of his father, Shi Jinbo, Chu Linfeng?" Yan felt that the name sounded familiar. She thought for a moment and said, "Is he the one who married 19 concubines, each of them outstanding beauties?" "Yes." Yan remembered the name Chu Linfeng. When she was in the army, The deputy generals and subordinates would gather together to chat. They didn't envy the emperor, but they envied Sir Jinbo the most. Sir Jinbo was born handsome and was famous for being a handsome man in a way. His wife was a few years older than him. She was ugly and had a fierce temperament. A wastrel like Chu Linfeng wouldn't give up so easily. Before they were married, he spent every day in the flower shop. After they were married, he became even more serious. The wife he married was virtuous. She seemed to know that she was ordinary and wasn't favored by her husband, so she never stopped him from taking in concubines. Over the years, he took in 19 concubines. Each of them was beautiful, charming, and had their own interests. But taking in concubines was one thing. Over the years, other than the 3 young masters who crawled out of his wife's womb, no concubine was able to give birth to Sir Jinbo's children. It was said that these concubines were all fed sterile drugs before they entered the Chu family. No matter how favored they were, if they didn't have children, they could only curry favor with the master or the mistress. Sir Jinbo's wife had a tight control over these concubines. No one dared to cause trouble under her watch. Sir Jinbo continued to be lovey-dovey with his concubines every day. Sir Jinbo's wife only pretended not to see and raised her 3 sons. Chu Xilan was Sir Jinbo's 4th son, but he wasn't born of Sir Jinbo's wife. Is he a concubine's illegitimate son? Yin asked. No, Lin Shuang said. Madame Chu is even stricter with her concubines than your father is with you. How could a concubine give birth to a son? Then, I don't know what exactly happened either. In short, one day, during the Chu family's banquet, there was an additional 4-year-old son named Chu Zhao. Lin Shuang took another sip of tea. Although it wasn't said, everyone knew that Chu Zhao was most likely Chu Linfeng's illegitimate son. He Yan's eyes widened. Madame Chu was very careful, but she didn't expect Sir Jinbo to have such a trick up his sleeve. The child was already 4 years old and recognized him in front of everyone. What else could happen? Lin Shuang spread his hands. If that was the case, Chu Xilan would only be Chu Xilan's illegitimate son. However, when Chu Xilan was 10 years old, he was registered under Madame Chu's name. Therefore, his current status is the 4th son of Sir Jinbo's official wife. Do you know why? Why? Because he was the favorite student of the current prime minister, Su Jingfu. Yin was stunned. Su Jingfu again? Although Sir Jinbo was dissolute, he wasn't a kind father. I think Chu Xilan didn't have a good life under Madame Chu. I don't know how he was able to live until he was 10 years old, and then he hooked up with Su Jingfu. How could Sir Jinbo not give Prime Minister Su face? Later, he registered Chu Zhao under Madame Chu's name. It was probably Su Jingfu's idea. Then this 4th young Master Chu is very powerful. Lin Shuang looked at Yin. Do you think he's very powerful? Very powerful. As you said, he didn't have any external help in the residence. His father didn't love him, and his mother wasn't by his side. Now that he's the official wife's young master, he was able to get His Majesty to send him to the Liangzhou guards to deliver the imperial edict. It's very powerful that he was able to reach this step on his own. If he wasn't powerful, how could he have become Su Jingfu's favorite student? Lin Shuang shook his head and sighed. Then what about his mother? Yin asked. Wasn't she taken into Count Sir Jinbo's residence? I don't know. Lin Shuang shook his head. I heard that she died after giving birth to him. If that wasn't the case, with Chu Xilan's current abilities, he should be able to let her live a better life. Yin nodded thoughtfully. I see. It's a pity that military governor Xiao doesn't like 4th young Master Chu. Xiao Ju and Su Jingfu were enemies, not friends. Chu Xilan was Su Jingfu's student. Naturally, he was also Xiao Ju's enemy. Brother, Lin Shuang said, if you had to choose between Huaijin and Chu Xilan, who would you side with? Yin felt that this question was simply inconceivable. Why do you ask? I'm just curious as to what choice the young lady from Dewey will make. I don't even know Chu Xilan, Yin said. Of course, I'll side with the governor. Lin Shuanghe revealed a meaningful smile. There's no need to speak so early. You'll be able to see Chu Xilan at the celebration banquet tomorrow. Yin. So what if I see him? What's so special about him? Yin didn't expect that, just as Lin Shuanghe said, she would see the man of Wei's dreams the next day. He was the fourth young master Chu Xilan, who could compete with Xiao Ju. It was rare that it didn't snow that night. The next day, it just so happened to be a sunny day. Although the weather was cold, people felt warm when the sun shone on them. Yin got out of bed to eat porridge. She felt that the wound on her waist healed faster after being exposed to the sun. The Liangzhou guards were really strange. During the summer, they were so hot that they would cry and scream whenever they saw the sun. During the winter, they would be happy if they could even see half the sun. She couldn't go to the martial arts arena for day training now, but she felt that the sun was very good, so she decided to walk around the courtyard with her staff. She had just reached the door when she heard Song Tao Tao's voice. I saw this golden pastry roll first. It's mine. Immediately after, a woman's good-natured voice said, Miss, this pastry roll was specially made by our young master chef. It didn't come from the Guard Institute's kitchen, so it's not yours. You think it's your young master's just because you say so? The young lady said angrily, It's all in the kitchen. How would I know if it was made by your chef? Since you have a chef, can't you just make another pastry roll? The process of making golden pastry rolls is troublesome. If we make another pastry roll, we'll miss the young master's mealtime. Then don't eat it. Miss. Yin couldn't listen anymore. He walked out and said, Miss Song. Song Tao Tao turned her head and looked over with the woman who was arguing with her. She said happily, Big brother this is a golden pastry roll. Do you want to try it? Yin, the woman also said, That's the young master's. Yin took the golden pastry roll and returned it to the woman. He said, She's just a child who doesn't know any better. Please don't mind her. Big brother Song Tao Tao stomped her feet in anger. Why did you return it to her? It's mine to begin with. Yin shook his head. She guessed that the young master the woman was talking about was probably the fourth young master of Count Shi Jin's estate, Chu Xilan. Chu Xilan and Xiao Ju's relationship was so delicate. If he caused any trouble for Xiao Ju because of this, the loss would outweigh the gain. Thank you, young master. The woman smiled sweetly at Yin. Yin was also stunned. For a moment, he was shocked by the young lady's beauty. There were very few young ladies in the Liang Province Guard. Excluding her, who was a fake, there were only Xin Muxue and Song Tao Tao. One was elegant and beautiful, while the other was adorable. Now that there was someone as beautiful as a peony, it was especially eye-catching. Even Chu Xilan's maidservant was this beautiful? Yin thought to himself. Previously, Lin Shuanghe had mentioned that Wei women ranked their husbands first. Only an idiot would choose Chu Xilan. If the maidservant he picked was already this beautiful, how could a normal woman catch his eye? He might as well choose Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju was surrounded by men. Perhaps he had seen too many men, and now he saw a woman. So his requirements were much lower and there was still a chance. Seeing Yin staring at the woman's face without saying anything, Song Tao Tao became even more anxious. She anxiously tugged on Yin's sleeve and said, Why are you looking at her? What's there to look at? The woman holding the golden pastry roll saw this and burst into laughter. Her smile was captivating. Ing Xiang, someone said. The maidservant named Ing Xiang immediately stopped smiling and bowed. Fourth young master. Fourth young master? Chu Xilan? Yin turned around, and his gaze fell on the person in front of him. It was a young man wearing a light jade-colored robe with extremely wide sleeves and a jade crown. He looked as noble and pure as an orchid, but also as handsome as a banished immortal. He had a faint smile on his face as he nodded at Yin. Yin frowned. This person's appearance was very familiar. When he saw Yin, he was also startled. After a moment, he smiled as if he had seen through Yin's thoughts. He stretched out his hand with his palm facing up and said softly, Little brother, you dropped something? Yin suddenly came back to his senses. She remembered where she had seen this person before. That day, she was still in Shuajing. For He Yunqing's tuition fee, she had racked her brains and had no choice but to go to Lutong village to gamble. However, she had been chased by the losers. After she had beaten them all, someone suddenly appeared and told her that she had dropped some money. That person's good looks were hard to forget as long as one had seen him. Now that he suddenly saw him here, because it was daytime, He Yin didn't recognize him for a moment. Instead, he recognized He Yin first. "You are fourth young Master Chu?" He Yin asked. Chu Xilan nodded. "That's me." He Yin was momentarily speechless. What kind of luck was this? What kind of coincidence was this? Just by casually climbing over a wall at night to fight, she was able to meet the man of Dewey's dreams. "This one is Chu Zhao." Chu Xilan looked at He Yin with a smile. "Little brother and I can be considered old acquaintances, but I don't know your name. May I know your name?" He Yin could somewhat understand why He Yin was able to be on par with Xiao Ju. He hurriedly returned the greeting. "You flatter me. This one is He Yin, the yin in grass and trees, He Yin in clear river and clear sea." Chu Zhao smiled. "That's a good name, but—" He looked around and asked in confusion, "Why is brother He here?" "Me?" He Yin said. "I'm a new recruit of the Liang Province Guards. However, I was injured a few days ago, so I did not go to the practice field for training." "I see." At this time, Song Taodao, who had been silent all this time, finally reacted. She carefully pulled on He Yan's hand. Perhaps it was because she saw that Chu Xilan was too handsome, but her aggressive attitude towards Ing Xiang instantly disappeared. She even felt a bit embarrassed. In a low voice, she asked, "Brother He, who is this person? Do you know him?" This question was difficult to answer. She knew Chu Zhao, but she was not as familiar with him as Song Taodao thought. It was just that she had suddenly seen a familiar face in the Liang Province Guards, so she subconsciously became a bit excited. He Yin said, "This is the fourth young master of Count Shi Jin's residence. I met him once when I was in Shuo capital." Chu Zhao smiled. "We can be considered old acquaintances." Chapter 120. When He Yin and Chu Xilan were talking, they didn't notice that Xiao Ju and Lin Shuanghe were standing behind a tree not too far away. Lin Shuanghe looked at them and asked curiously, "It seems that Sister He knows Chu Xilan? When I asked her yesterday, why did she say that she didn't know him?" "You asked her?" "Yes. I even asked her if you and Chu Xilan had a conflict, whose side would she stand on?" Lin Shuanghe waved his fan and smiled. "Do you want to know how she answered?" "Xiao Ju, no. Why are you like this?" Lin Shuanghe said, "Let me tell you." Sister He said without thinking that she doesn't know Chu Xilan, so of course she would stand on your side. However, he looked at the two people talking in the distance and said, "She clearly knows him, so why did she say that she doesn't know him?" Xiao Ju sneered. "Why would you believe the words of a swindler?" "Swindler?" Lin Shuanghe looked at Xiao Ju. "What did she lie to you about?" Could it be? He thought of something and pretended to exclaim in a low voice, "She and Chu Xilan are in cahoots? Is she also one of Su Jingfu's people?" Xiao Ju didn't want to bother with him. As they were talking, the beautiful servant named Ing Xiang turned her head and saw them. She immediately called out from afar, "Military Governor Xiao, young Master Lin." There was nowhere to hide now. Lin Shuanghe stood up and nodded reservedly. "Fourth young Master Chu, brother He Yin asked, 'Did you also come out as sunbathe?' We just came out for a walk." Lin Shuanghe held his fan and looked at He Yin and Chu Zhao. He asked tentatively, "Did brother He and fourth young Master Chu know each other?" He Yin said, "It's just a chance encounter. I only found out that he was fourth young Master Chu after meeting him at the Liang Province Guard Institution. I was also very surprised." "What do you mean by that? Let's hear it." Lin Shuanghe was relentless. Chu Zhao stood there with a smile. He had no intention of taking the initiative to explain. Xiao Ju's gaze was also calm, but it made Yi Yin feel a little cold. Song Taodao, on the other hand, was very curious and asked, That's right. How did you two know each other?" That, Yi Yin could only brace himself and explain. Previously, when I was in Shuajing, I went to Lutong village to gamble at night and won a lot of silver. I was chased by people and accidentally met fourth young Master Chu. Fourth young Master Chu found the money I left behind and returned it to me. At that time, I did not know his identity, so I hurriedly thanked him and left. Lutong Villa? Song Taodao was shocked. Big brother you're gambling? Didn't you say that your father is very strict with you and that you don't leave the house? Lin Shuanghe couldn't help but ask. Yin raised his head and met Xiao Ju's half-smile. He couldn't help but feel his scalp go numb. Taking a step back, he said, "At that time, I was forced to make a living. I only went there once. I haven't gone there since." Lin Shuanghe and Xiao Ju both knew that she was a woman. For a woman to go gambling alone at night, it was a bit too shocking. Furthermore, gambling was not a good thing, but to say it in front of this group of important people really made her feel ashamed. "I didn't think that brother he would come to the Liang Province Guard Institution," Chu Zhao said with a slight smile. "It can be said that you and I are fated." That night, I still remember how strong brother he was when he dealt with those thugs. "Are you very strong?" Lin Shuanghe asked Yin. Yin gave a perfunctory smile. "I was just lucky. At tonight's celebratory feast, I must drink a few more cups with brother Chu Zhao said. "That way, we won't waste our fate." Yin, thank you. Fourth young Master Chu. She thought that this Chu Zhao was really too easy to get along with. As the son of Shi Jinbo, and now Su Jingfu's favorite student, no matter what, it was rare for him to be so patient and gentle to a normal recruit like her. Not to mention whether he was good or bad, just based on his ability to conduct himself, there was nothing to say. "Ing Xiang," Chu Zhao glanced at Song Taodao and said with a smile, "Give the golden roll to this little girl to eat." "I don't need these." Song Taodao was overwhelmed by this favor. For me?" "Yes," he said warmly. "If you really like it, I can have the chef make it for you every day." "But, young master," Ing Xiang said hesitantly, "I brought the chef here especially for you." "I'm not particular about what I eat," Chu Zhao said. "There's no need to make these every day." Then, Song Taodao hesitated for a moment, then looked at him. "Thank you, fourth young Master Chu." "You're welcome." Yin looked at him and felt that Lin Shuanghe had mentioned yesterday that Dewei was the #1 man in women's dreams. No wonder Chu Xilan had surpassed him. He looked like this, and he was so gentle and considerate to women. He was probably the type that everyone, regardless of age, would like. Ing Xiang handed the plate with the golden roll to Song Taodao. Chu Zhao looked at Xiao Ju. "Military Governor Xiao, where are you planning to go?" "The martial arts arena." Xiao Ju smiled. "Fourth young Master Chu, do you also want to go?" "There's no need for me to go." Chu Zhao smiled. "I'll just go back to my room and read for a while." Lin Shuanghe cupped his hands towards Chu Zhao. "Then I'll see you tonight." He then looked at Yin. "Brother what are you doing?" "Me?" Yin didn't dare to stay too long with Chu Zhao. This person was still Su Jingfu's student. Who knew if he was a friend or foe? He said, "The weather is good today. I'm planning to take advantage of the sun to walk around the courtyard and recover." "That's fine too," Lin Shuanghe instructed. "Just don't make too much of a commotion." Ian nodded. The group then parted ways. Because Chu Zhao lived nearby, Ian didn't dare to go out casually, even though she really did want to ask Chu Zhao about the situation in Shuajing. However, looking at the atmosphere between Xiao Ju and Chu Zhao, at least now wasn't a good time to ask. She went to the courtyard and tried to throw away the stick. She walked around for a while and only stopped when she felt tired. Then, she went back to her room to sleep and read. In the blink of an eye, it was already evening. Chung Lisu knocked on the door early in the morning. "Big brother." Yin went to open the door for him. Chung Lisu had changed into a new set of amber robes. The corners of the robes were embroidered with a group of black-tailed koi fish. He was in high spirits and grabbed Yan's hand. "I was afraid that you would be sleeping, so I didn't dare to come early. Look at my new robes. Do you think they look good?" "Yan, can I ask you a question?" "What is it?" Why do you have koi fish embroidered on every piece of clothing? When they were in Liangzhou City, Chung Li-su gave her a set of robes with koi fish embroidered on the corners. He had wanted to ask him for a long time. Was there a special meaning behind it? You don't know. Chung Li-su turned around. Speaking of which, my father fell in love with my mother at first sight. However, my mother's family had already taken her place in another family. They disliked my father because he was 2 years younger than my mother. My father bribed the cook in the residence to send the koi fish to my mother's small kitchen. When the cook was butchering the koi fish, he saw the letter inside. My mother was moved by the letter. Later, she persuaded my grandmother to marry my father. Chung Li-su usually didn't remember poetry and literature. However, he remembered it by heart now. He spoke with fervor and assurance. The guest came from afar, leaving me a pair of koi fish. Cooked koi fish, and there was a ruler in the book. Kneeling and reading the book, what was in the book? On the top, it said to be longing for each other. On the bottom, it said to be eating more rice. He proudly said, my name came from this book. Hien was stunned. Is that interesting? That's right. Chung Li-su turned around and showed Hien the koi embroidery on his body. Later on, my clothes and hairpins were mostly in the shape of a koi fish. After all, the koi fish were my parents' matchmakers. Wearing it is wearing my parents' love for me. At this moment, Hien was truly envious of Chung Li-su. She said, your parents are so good. Of course. Chung Li-su finished speaking and looked at Hien. Big brother, aren't you going to wear something else for tonight's celebration? Hien lowered his head and looked at himself. What's wrong with wearing this? Isn't everyone dressed like this? She was still wearing the uniform of the Liang Province Guards. Today, she specially wore red for the celebration. But you're the one who defeated Rydamuko. It's too plain to dress like this. I don't have any other clothes, Hien said. This is good. Let's go. The instructor can't wait. Chung Li-su shrugged and didn't force her. She closed the door for her, and the two of them walked to the wilderness at the foot of Baiwa Mountain. Today was the celebration banquet to celebrate the Liang Province Guard's victory over Rida Muzi's rebel army. There was no snow tonight, but it was colder than usual. A bonfire burned in the wilderness. The recruits sat on the ground and drank wine and ate meat. Although they were drinking wine and eating meat, compared to the previous Mid-Autumn Festival, it was much more desolate. After all, they had just lost their comrades and were still traumatized from the war. A celebration was a little forced. The rewards had already been distributed to the instructors. Xiao Ju was very generous and distributed all the spoils of war to the soldiers. She didn't keep the rewards from Her Majesty for herself either. When Chung Li-su arrived at the wilderness, she went to find Xiao Ju. Hien, on the other hand, went to the other side of Mount Hong. These days, she did not go to the martial arts arena, so the number of times she met with them was much less. Xiao Mai saw him and shouted, Ehiga, you're here. Hien sat down beside her. How are you? Hong Shan handed her a piece of roasted rabbit meat. Are you feeling better? I see that you're not holding a stick anymore. Can you go now? Hien took the rabbit meat. The rabbit meat was roasted until it was sizzling with oil. During the winter, all the wild beasts were hibernating, so rabbits were difficult to catch. Just the smell of it made her hungry. She took a bite and chewed as she said, not bad. In another 2 months, I'll be able to fight alongside you all again. Forget it, Wang Ba said with disgust. Aren't you the only one in the limelight every time? I heard that the higher-ups gave you 10 taels of silver as a reward. He was very jealous. You're rich. Brother, he almost lost his life. 10 taels of silver is nothing. You should get a bigger share. Jiang Jiao said, but I thought that brother he would get a promotion this time. I didn't expect that he didn't. Hien was angry when this matter was brought up. Logically speaking, she made a contribution and helped the Liang Province Guards. No matter what, she shouldn't be a small soldier. Even if she didn't get a promotion, she should go to the 9 Flags Battalion. Even if she didn't go to the 9 Flags Battalion, she should go to the Vanguard Battalion. But now, she received more rewards than normal recruits, but promotion? She didn't even see a shadow. Was it so hard to be promoted as a soldier under Xiao Ju? Don't say any more. If you continue, brother, he will get angry again. Huang Xiong saw that she was unhappy and said, "You've already won over everyone in the Liang province guards. Even if it's not now, you'll get a promotion sooner or later. Don't worry." He Yin went against her conscience and said, "I'm not worried. It was just that she tossed and turned on her bed in the middle of the night. She wanted nothing more than to rush into the room next door and grab Xiao Ju and ask her why." Although the celebratory banquet was a celebratory banquet, Xiao Ju wasn't here. The rewards had already been distributed to everyone, so tonight was just a gathering of the recruits. The Liang province guards were next to Mount Baiyue, while the southern prefecture guards were next to Wulu River. They minded their own business. Shirtu poured Yin a bowl of wine and said, "Drink." Yin stared at the wine in the bowl. "I'm injured right now. I can't drink so much." "That's right. I almost forgot." Hong Shan took the bowl away. "Then don't drink. Just drink water." Yin said, "Okay." After sitting for a while, she heard someone call her from behind. "Brother He." Yin turned around and was stunned. It was actually Chu Zhao. By Chu Zhao's side, there was also that beautiful maidservant, Ing Xiang. It was rare to see such a beautiful woman in the Liang province guards. For a moment, Hong Shan and the others were stunned. Wang Ba whispered, "This brat. Why does he always have such good luck with women?" He thought that he was whispering, but everyone present heard him. Ing Xiang couldn't help but laugh. Chu Zhao also laughed. "I already told Brother He that I would definitely drink with you today," Ing Xiang said. "Before our young master came, he specially brought Chong and Chun. Please drink with us, young master He." As soon as she finished speaking, she heard Wang Ba gulp loudly. She was in a bit of a dilemma. If she knew that she was drinking with Chu Zhao, would Xiao Ju think that she was in cahoots with Chu Zhao? It would really be snowing in June? As if he could see her dilemma, Chu Zhao smiled and said, "It's just a cup. If it's inconvenient for Brother He, then it's fine." He Yin had always been amenable to coaxing, but not coercion. Seeing such an immortal young master being so gentle and knowing when to advance or retreat, she felt a bit apologetic. She wasn't some important person, so why would he personally invite her? It was just a cup of wine. She could just treat it as returning the favor of that silver ingot. He Yin said, "It's just a cup of wine. There's nothing inconvenient about it." "Then please follow this servant, young master He." Ing Xiang turned around with a smile. He Yin originally thought that Chu Zhao was talking about drinking in the wilderness where the recruits were. Who would have thought that he would bring her to Chu Zhao's room? She didn't know if Xiao Ju was using her position to take revenge, but Chu Zhao's room really couldn't be considered luxurious. It couldn't even compare to Chung Li Su's room. It was just a bit better than the bunk rooms the recruits had. However, the courtyard was very large. On the stone bench in the courtyard, there was a jug of wine and some dried fruits and snacks. I didn't know what young master he likes to eat, so I casually prepared some side dishes. Ing Xiang said, ashamed, "If it's not to your liking, I ask that young master he be more tolerant. There's no need to be so polite. It's already very good." Yin was overwhelmed by the favor. She was only a recruit in the Liang province guard. This was the first time she was treated like someone with status. However, Yin was also secretly curious. Why was Chu Zhao treating her so well? She was just a recruit. There was no need to be so polite. Just as she was thinking this, Ing Xiang had already picked up the white jade jug on the table and poured it into 2 jade cups. She smiled and said, "I heard young Master Lin say that young Master he is injured, so it is inconvenient for you to drink. This spring of Chong and is mild and not strong. It is sweet in the mouth. Young Master he should be fine after drinking a little." He Yin smiled and said, "Miss Ing Xiang is still the most considerate." Ing Xiang pursed her lips and smiled. She put down the jug of wine and retreated behind Chu Zhao. "Last time when I saw brother he and Shua Jing, I was in too much of a hurry and didn't get to know you well." Chu Zhao smiled and said, "Since we met in Liang province, it seems that we are fated to meet. Let's drink a toast." He raised his wine cup and lightly tapped it against the air in front of He Yin. He Yin understood and raised his wine cup as well. He thought to himself, Last time during the middle of autumn, he got drunk and got into a fight with Xiao Ju. He even crushed his zither. He definitely couldn't repeat the same mistake tonight. However, this wine wasn't strong, so she wouldn't get drunk like last time. Moreover, she only drank a little, so there shouldn't be any problems. She tilted her head back and poured all the wine in the wine cup down her throat. He Yin was stunned. Chu Zhao was also stunned. After a long while, Chu Zhao smiled and said, "Brother, he is indeed forthright." He Yin, he had a habit of drinking in one gulp. He wanted to drink in small sips, but his hands were subconsciously moving. When he came back to his senses, he regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. He really wanted to scold himself. Why couldn't I control my hands? However, He Yin praised, "What a fragrant wine." Ing Xiang snickered. Chong and spring isn't something you can drink every day. In the Chu estate, there's only one remaining pot left this year, and it's here. Is it that precious? He Yin was shocked and pushed the wine cup back. He didn't dare to drink anymore. Although this wine is precious, it can't be compared to you, brother He. Chu Zhao smiled. He reached out to take the wine pot and filled He Yan's empty wine cup. Without Chong and Spring, you can buy the 18 immortals. Without like-minded friends, you won't be able to find them so easily. He Yin, she said, "Brother Chu, do you know that you're the #1 dreamer of all the women in Dawei?" Chu Zhao was stunned. Now, I think you can add men into the list. He was so gentle and generous to men. Any man who stayed with him would be in danger. The courtyard was silent. After a while, Chu Zhao laughed heartily. He shook his head and said, "Brother He, you're really interesting. I'm telling the truth." He Yin was very sincere. "Brother He, you flatter me." He waved his hand. "I don't dare to be #1. Chong and Spring smelled refreshing. It wasn't as fragrant and strong as the 18 immortals, but it was quite strong. He Yin felt a little lightheaded. When he saw the gentle and charming smile of the person in front of him, he raised his wine cup and said, "Brother Chu, you deserve it. Let me toast you." He downed the wine in one gulp. On the other side, Lin Shuanghe was looking around for He Yin. "Have you seen He Yin?" he asked. Xiaomai had finished eating the barbecued meat. She went to steal some from the bonfire. When she heard him, she turned around and said, "Are you looking for He Ge?" He Ge was just taken away by 4th young Master Chu from the capital. Chu Zhao, Lin Shuanghe asked curiously, "Why did he take Brother He away?" "To drink." Xiaomai scratched her head. He said he would treat He Ge to a taste of Chong and Spring. When Lin Shuanghe heard the news, he immediately rushed back. When he reached Xiao Ju's room, the door wasn't closed. He pushed it open. Xiao Ju was sitting at the table, wiping her sword. Chong and Spring wasn't an ordinary sword. It had to be cleaned every day to ensure that the blade was crystal clear. Lin Shuanghe asked, "Do you know where Yin went?" Xiao Ju didn't bother to answer him. Chu Zhao took him to drink. Xiao Ju looked up. "So? Aren't you worried, big brother?" Lin Shuanghe slammed his fan on the table. "That's Chu Zhao we're talking about. Move aside," Xiao Ju said unhappily. "You're blocking the light." Lin Shuanghe moved to the side. "Don't wipe it." In public, Chu Zhao is Su Jingfu's man. If he wants to recruit He Yin to his camp, what will you do? I heard that He Yan's strength is one of the best in the Liangzhou guards. If such a talent falls into Su Jingfu's hands, it will be very troublesome. When he saw that Xiao Ju's expression didn't change, he went around to the other side. "In private, how can you let your girl drink with another man?" As soon as he said this, Xiao Ju stopped what he was doing. He looked up and glanced at Lin Shuanghe. "Who told you that she's mine? Come on." Lin Shuanghe obviously didn't believe him. "If she's not yours, how can you let her live next door with a door in between?" "You even let her pick the lock. How come I didn't realize that you could do this before? Are you interested?" "Xiao Ju, if you don't have anything else to say, then get out. Don't bother me." "Xiao Huaijin, you're not Chu Xilan's opponent if you're so fierce." As he spoke, he heard a rustling sound coming from the middle door of the house, as if a mouse was shuttling in and out of the clutter. The two of them looked up and saw a silver wire sticking out of the one keyhole on the door. The silver wire twisted in a crooked manner and accurately pushed the lock pin inwards. With a clack, the lock fell to the ground and the door opened. Lin Shuanghe clapped his hands. Good skill. Then he looked at Xiao Ju. And you said she's not yours. Xiao Ju was speechless for a moment and stood up. Tian walked over from the door. She walked very slowly and steadily. When she saw Lin Shuanghe, she even greeted Lin Shuanghe with her hands cupped together. Brother Lin, Lin Shuanghe, why aren't you calling me Dr. Lin anymore? Tian acted as if she didn't see him and walked over to Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju's gaze fell on He Yin. The young man was wearing the red uniform of the Liang Province Guards. His hair was neat and tidy as he bowed respectfully to Lin Shuanghe. At this moment, Lin Shuanghe and Xiao Ju were both stunned. The window wasn't closed, and the wind blew in, causing the scrolls on the table to flip slightly. It brought with it a burst of coolness and a faintly discernible aroma of wine. It was faint but not real. The sweet and refreshing smell was like the spring day in Chang'an City, sparkling and beautiful. Her gaze was even more sparkling than the spring sun. Xiao Ju felt a chill run down his spine as he felt a sense of déjà vu. She vaguely remembered that someone had looked at her with the same gaze on the night of mid-autumn. Have you been drinking? As he spoke, he subconsciously pushed one Xiangqin closer. When this person was drunk, it was impossible to tell if she was sober or not just by looking at her face. However, her actions would only be inconceivable. Lin Shuanghe smiled and picked up his tea, planning to take a sip and watch the show. Tian looked up and gave Xiao Ju a big smile. I can memorize the way to university now, father. Lin Shuanghe spat out his tea. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.